Three. There we go. Well, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good morning to everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest in district business. We've got a very busy agenda, as you have already probably seen. And so let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Mr. Classy, could you go over the safety procedures, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and supervisors of the board, and to all our guests and visitors. We just want to cover some important safety information before we start this meeting. I'd like everyone to identify the exit doors in case there's an evacuation and we need to leave in a quick manner. Please leave in an orderly fashion and wait outside in the courtyard area for further direction. If we need first aid or AEDs, the hotel will provide those to us. And thank you very much and enjoy the meeting.
Okay, so we're going to hear public comments. Just to reiterate, any speaker is going to be allotted 3 minutes. You'll be told when your time's up. And as I've indicated before, this is a time for the board to hear from the public. The board won't comment during this time and won't answer any questions, although we may ask some questions. And so I'll call you up by the number on your card. First, number 1. Please identify yourself by giving us your name and telling us if you're acting in a representative capacity, and if so, who you represent.
30 years ago, I spoke on this issue in front of the Board of Orange County Commissioners. My name is James Mead. I detest public speaking, so I don't speak a lot and like this, so you have to bear with me. Give me a minute. You know, 57 years ago, a man died, and his dream died with him. And we've seen this district bastardize his dream. There's supposed to be 20,000 people in a community of tomorrow, and it's not here. There's 60. There's a fight over this. You guys can fix that. The last time a monorail was built, when was that? This is your job. This is your job to bring this man's dream back. He's dead. We can't do anything about that. But we can bring his dream back to life. You can do that. It's your job. It's the job of Disney. It's the job of Florida to do this. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Number 2.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Aaron Colburn, Vice President of the Reedy Creek Professional Firefighters. I want to extend a greeting to you back to property from our crews and our on-duty people. We have several of our first responders here today. The crews that covered this area wanted to be here today to welcome you back to property as well, but they were given a direction from the fire department that they were not to attend. So they asked me to do that for them. I just wanted to bring to your attention an event that happened this weekend with one of our members. He was responding to the hospital, transporting a patient. They had just cleared. He felt poorly, decided to turn back and go to the hospital. Something wasn't right. As he walked into the hospital doors at Florida Hospital Celebration, he went into cardiac arrest and collapsed. His partner, who is here today, started rendering aid right away, brought it to the attention of the staff. They started CPR. They were able to get him back. He went to ICU. His family and children met him there. His fire department family gathered around him. He was released yesterday from the hospital. He walked out, thanks to the quick aid of his crew members and the hospital. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention. And in the past, we have had issues with our workers' comp here. As I'm sure you're aware, there's a heart and lung bill that has presumption protective for first responders in cardiac arrest and heart and lung related issues. But you all have demonstrated your commitment to the first responders, to running this district in the sunshine and appropriately. And his family wanted us to pass along that they are thankful for you, that you were here, and that they have all the faith that you will make sure that this district and administration takes care of her husband and the father of her children. And he's also a big supporter of you all and wanted us to say welcome back to property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your service to the district. Number 3.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Kelly. I'm the secretary of the Reedy Creek Firefighters. First and foremost, I want to thank all the board members for the progress that we've made, and the local is looking forward to the progress we will continue to make together in the future. Our local first responders were 100% in support of this new board, and it's been a breath of fresh air over how fair this board has been to us from the get-go. I just wanted to touch base on our contract negotiations and where they currently stand. For 5 years, we have negotiated to no avail. This new board was put in place, and just this past week, with the board's help and direction, we were able to tentatively agree to 21 articles. This is a huge step and a huge help from this board. This just goes to show the type of progress this board is capable of. We have a total of 45 articles in our proposal, and we are almost halfway there. We still have important topics that need to be agreed upon. These include minimum staffing, retiree health care, our special operations team, and brought to light by VP Colburn, our annual physicals. These need to include very important tests such as calcium scoring to vitally protect our first responders and give them the best possible test to assure they're being protected just as they protect this very property. Again, we look forward to the progress we were able to make together, and we thank all of you for your hard work to help the first responders of this district. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments, and thank you for your service to the district. Number 4.
Good morning. My name is Sean Pierce. I'm a lieutenant with Reedy Creek Fire and past vice president of Local 2117, Reedy Creek Professional Firefighters. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to address the board, and I have provided you with a couple of documents that will provide factual evidence of what I'm about to discuss. You guys are aware of Jim Dormany. He was a lieutenant who passed away, line of duty death. He still doesn't have his PSOB to his family, and I think the board has put some pressure, and we're starting to work on that, but it's taken 6 years. Another Central Florida fire department, local fire department, had the line of duty death very similar to Jim's. They received that check within 90 days. In 2019, we had a firefighter, Steve Pomanowski, one of the most exemplary employees we could possibly have. He worked out every day, excellent paramedic, brought his meals measured out in containers every day, had the massive heart attack. What happens? Commercial risk management, the district's workers' comp management company, shows up and asks his wife what kind of energy drinks he drinks, how many a day, when the cardiologist says that he only has a 10% chance of survival through the night. That's not the time to address those issues. At the time I met, as the vice president, I met with John Classy, the district administrator, and asked him to change the policy and form to allow employees to donate sick and vacation time to the Pomanowskis. His answer was that we needed to wait until we negotiated a new policy or form. It's hard to believe that a simple form to help a first responder and his family in a time of need is more difficult to get approved than the recent land use agreement. Forward to 2019, or 2021, I have a neck injury. District sends me a denial, says they've unfounded accusations that I'm faking my injury. Requested an investigation letter, no response from the district. In January of 22, I had an AFib ablation, have rapid heart rate, had an ablation, went to cardiac rehab, went into another rhythm, SVT. My heart rate was 240. Went to a new cardiologist. They did an ablation just this past March 16th, and I'm currently in cardiac rehab. Meanwhile, the district cancels my workers' comp benefits for non-compliance to attend their appointments that they don't make. You know, they should schedule the appointments themselves, but they don't. Moving forward, 1 year notice with an incorrect date. So we have to, if we're out on medical for more than 1 year, we get administratively terminated. They send me a letter, they're gonna fire me last October.
Bill Dover, I'm going to relinquish my time for Sean.
Thank you. Proceed.
Give me a letter that they're gonna fire me last October. Well, that wasn't actually the right date. I hadn't been out a year. So even with their own document that I provided you, it talks about me returning to work in April. They also send, this is commercial risk that sends this information, sends me a Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office information, has my name on the letter, open the letter, and it has all his personal information about his injury and his denial. So at least commercial risk is consistent with denials. Another incident of incompetence, they send Johnny Duncan, a 32-year employee of the district, firefighter, a notice of denial. They misspell denial and reference the wrong statute. So, you know, what they don't understand is this incompetence affects our lives. While we're supposed to be healing from a cardiac incident or any of that stuff, we have to deal with this undue stress because they're not paying attention to the company that they hired to manage this. So my question to you is, how can the district administrator and his associates treat first responders like this, at the same time preach one district, one goal, excellence? I trust this current board to end this type of treatment to the men and women who serve the district. And I think Mark Twain said it best: it is never wrong to do the right thing. And the right thing to do in this case is remove the people responsible for this type of treatment. That would include John Classy, Jason Middleton, and Eddie Fernandez, along with commercial risk management. I appreciate you letting me address the board.
Thank you, sir, for your comments, and thank you for your service to the district. I believe number 5 was allotted his time, and so I would call up either number 5, Mr. Dover, or number 6, Mr. Fox. Are you Mr. Fox? And Mr. Dover, did you allot your, yes. Okay. Yes, sir. So, Mr. Fox, it's your turn.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm going to defer my time to Tim Stromtis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Stromsness, a current Reedy Creek firefighter and the president emeritus of the Reedy Creek Professional Firefighters. I really appreciate this opportunity to address this new board. I'm here to speak in support of this new board. This 11th hour land use agreement by the previous Board of Supervisors and current district administrator adversely affects us as first responders because for over 50 years, Disney controlled this board and Reedy Creek administration. During this time, Disney through Reedy Creek failed to provide the resources necessary to ensure that fire and EMS services kept up up with the growth of Disney and the increasing number of visitors. For instance, Reedy Creek spent $280 million to build parking garages at Disney Springs for Disney, while we are currently responding with a 20-year-old fire engine with over 200,000 miles that just failed its pump test this week. We've had to respond to visitors with medical emergencies in SUVs instead of ambulances or rescues because of Reedy Creek administration's mismanagement. While Disney controlled the district, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to accommodate more visitors without ensuring that safety through adequate fire and EMS resources were made. This 11th hour land use agreement, if left under Disney, will only perpetuate the first responders' inability to keep the visitors of Walt Disney World safe. I spoke to one of the new board members and they summed up our new vision perfectly. They said, this is a world-class tourist destination and these visitors deserve world-class fire and EMS services. We could not agree more, and we have been saying that for years. In conclusion, the district needed oversight due to the old Board of Supervisors being elected on the premise of 1 acre, 1 vote. To explain how the old board was elected, I'm going to tell you a story based on my personal experience. Thomas DeWolf, due to health reason, who wrote the charter, was stepping down. He'd been in office for over 40 years. They quitclaim deeded his land over to Thomas Moses, who was a former district administrator. As fast as I'm speaking here today is as fast as this election went. Somebody from the board said, I nominate Tom Moses. Somebody from the crowd stood up, a representative from Disney, and said, I cast all 17,000 votes for Tom Moses. Election over. No matter what side of the political aisle you are on or your political affiliation, that is not a democracy. I support this current board because no election in America should be based on the 1 acre, 1 vote. It should be based on the ideology of 1 person, 1 vote. And through the gubernatorial election process, that is how this board was put into office. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and thank you for your service to the district. And then finally, last public comment from number 8.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not a firefighter, but I'd like to thank you all for your service. Good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Tyler Heron, and I'm a resident of Celebration, Florida. Celebration was built by the Walt Disney Company in 1996, and since then has continued to grow while having a productive relationship with both Disney and the Reedy Creek Improvement District, as both these parties own the land and surrounds and crisscrosses our town. Recently, residents are starting to grow concerned as the governor continues to put forward ideas that this new board might pursue that can also affect the well-being of Celebration. Some examples that have specifically been stated include adding toll roads in the district, many of which that our residents use to get to and from work, to abolishing the district planning committee, which oversees land around and in our town, to even floating the idea of using district lands to build a state prison. Residents are concerned we will become innocent bystanders in these actions. The people of Celebration would like to respectfully remind the board that our town is completely surrounded by district lands and to consider how these decisions have the ability to impact our town and the people that live there. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments, sir. We'll now move to the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda, the March 8, 2023 meeting minutes. Is there a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any opposition? Note that the motion passes unanimously. Next item of business is information items. The first on that, 6.1, are some financial reports, budgeting type reports that Mr. Classy has put on the agenda. And then the other 3 items were put on at the request of Supervisor Ongst, and they're there for your observation. We have a really busy reports part of the agenda. The first report will come from management. Mr. Classy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things to report on for you. First, just for your awareness, that I had a conversation with Mr. Sasso regarding housing within the district, and I think later on in the agenda, we do have an item 8.4 that would be a perfect spot to be talking about housing, or a perfect assignment to investigate housing within the district. Secondly, the district team met last week and began working on various improvements and enhancements to the district website. As mentioned last meeting, we are looking to implement changes and updates for easier and better public access to the information. We anticipate completion of this work in June. Part of the website would include updating our district logo, and my suggestion would be to have one board member work with myself and staff to finalize that new logo so we can launch that with the new website in June. So that's just my suggestion, but I'll take your lead on how you like to move forward with our new branding, if you will.
Well, do we have a volunteer from the board?
Or you can.
If you'd like, but if someone else wants it, I'm happy to yield to another board member.
I think you found a volunteer.
All right. Everybody else stepped back, and he stood right where he was. All right, I get how that works. Okay, the next thing I'd like to touch on is, at Mr. Onk's request, is to discuss guardrails within the district. That's been a topic with some media recently. So on January 4th, 2023, 10 Tampa Bay contacted the district about some guardrails inside Disney and on the entrance approach roads that have been considered improperly installed, or ones that use a mix match of parts. 28 locations were identified in the message. 10 locations are on district-owned and maintained roadways, and the remaining 18 locations are actually on FDOT-owned and maintained roadways. The district team completed an immediate inspection and began the process for engineering evaluation, design, and construction for necessary improvements or upgrades. For all district roadway projects, the designs, including guardrails, are completed in accordance with the then current design standards published by the FDOT. Design standards change over time and in response to newer technologies and newer or better materials, as well as improved public safety. In 2016, the Federal Highway Administration and the American Association of State Highways and Transportation Officials began implementing a program to guide states in the next advancement of safety standards and requirements to countrywide growing concerns over highway safety items such as guardrails, safety barriers, and impact attenuation devices. That initiative yielded what's called the Manual of Assessing Safety Hardware. Soon thereafter, Florida began to formulate its own multi-year plan to meet these MASH guidelines. In 2017, that following year, the district contracted with a professional engineering firm to identify cost and prioritize any guardrail components or barrier sections that have been degraded or sustained enough damage to warrant replacement. Beginning in 2018, the district began a multi-year program to replace or implement upgrades to the existing guardrails within the district. Many locations were included in our capital program that we've been going on for the past 10 years. That capital program is new roadway construction or pavement rehab. Since that time, 30 of 102 locations have been addressed. In March 2023, a second media inquiry was received that included several repeat locations, but some new locations as well. There were 69 locations identified, with 38 being on roadways owned and maintained by the district. The district guardrail locations identified in both inquiries are the first priority for us making improvements. To be thorough, the district has engaged a professional engineering firm to complete an update and review of all guardrail locations on district roadways using the same guidelines as FDOT. That analysis should be completed within the next 30 days, which provide guidance to prioritize any immediate improvements necessary to address urgent safety measures, as well as replace older guardrails with new facilities based on the new and current design standards. The analysis will be used to establish future annual budget to complete the guardrail program started a few years ago. Since the program started, the district has spent approximately $2.5 million, and we anticipate another $10 million to $13 million will be needed over the next several years to complete the work. In the months ahead and part of the current fiscal year, we anticipate another 15 locations in the two inquiries will be addressed. On a side note, FDOT is currently underway with a similar program statewide. Their discovery phase is currently has a targeted completion date of May 31st this year, but their scope of work, funding, and schedule have yet been determined. That's, if any questions on guardrails, I'll be glad to answer any.
Any questions from the board?
Did have just a couple, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Classy, thank you for adding this to the agenda, and I do want to thank Channel 10 in Tampa for bringing this to my attention and to the board's attention. There were a lot of numbers kind of thrown out there. The one that stuck out to me was 30 out of 102 locations, and so I just want to make sure I'm understanding all the numbers. Some locations were identified by WTSP Channel 10. What I'm interested in is how many locations have we identified to date that are not up to current standards?
Well, we have that analysis being done right now, so I'll have that within the next 30 days to have a complete program established. But we started a program back in 2017-18 to address 30 of 102 locations. Their 69 locations they identified are separate from ours that we looked at the first 30. So it's kind of merging two initiatives happening at the same time.
And you said of the 69 that they identified, 38 of those are ours?
That's correct, yes.
And by ours, I mean district.
District, right. The others could be either state DOT on the entrances to the district, or they actually could be on private roadways.
Okay. And can you just briefly explain, some of the ways these guardrails are not up to current code? Is it based on wear and tear from accidents? Is it based on the way they were installed? Is it based on the way they were designed, the materials that were used? All of the above?
All of the above. As an example of what was discovered 5 or 6 years ago is the state changed its standard for the wood post and the backing behind the guardrail. If you remember, there's a post and the actual guardrail sits on top of that. The old way was using wood, and they changed that standard to use metal. And so we've been going through and updating our systems based on that design change. So that's one example of where they've changed the standards. And then the end treatments are also evolving with design, improving safety measures. So that's the area that we're focusing most on right now is those end treatments.
Perfect. And just from my perspective, I appreciate the work on this and expediting it. It's something that I know this board takes public safety as paramount, and I'd like to see it accomplished sooner than later. And as we go into budgeting for next year, I'd like to see that a priority in terms of identifying particularly the most needed replacements first, but I'd like to get it all done as soon as possible.
Yep, that's why we're doing the full analysis, and we'll present that to you in the budget cycle.
And my guess is that Channel 10's here somewhere, so if they want a request for you to talk to them or someone to talk to them afterwards, I'd appreciate if you would accommodate them on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then my last comment, Mr. Chair, is that I just want to touch on agenda item 8.6 that talks about a special advisor to the board. And I want to just comment that there are a lot of challenges ahead of the board and the district ahead. The board has raised and is pursuing significant issues and initiatives. I think the board could need a dedicated and timely support from management and staff to support those initiatives. So looking at a special advisor idea is certainly something that we would support and to help the board on all your actions.
Mr. Chair, if I may speak to that point.
Sure.
For the benefit of the board and everyone else, I've had a lot of discussions with Mr. Classy for the past week that I think are quite productive about keeping him involved with the district, but also simultaneously working towards a position where we can appoint, as we're required by statute, a district administrator and someone that might be new, which is not uncommon when it comes to transitions between boards. As part of those discussions, Mr. Classy and I have been working with legal counsel to come up with a proposition for the board to consider, hopefully at the next meeting, about what that might look like, including having Mr. Classy stay on to assist the board, including with any transition and with existing projects for up to a calendar year, or as needed at the board's discretion. Hopefully at the next board meeting, we'll have something to discuss in a more concrete sense, maybe before then. But I think it's, in our discussions with Mr. Classy, he's been very supportive, and I think it's been a positive conversation. And I think it'll help the board and the district in a transition in a very positive way that doesn't result in any disruptions or issues that the board could not effectively and efficiently address. So I wanted to add that information item somewhat to the report, and I know I'm encroaching upon 8.6 quite a bit, but I thought since they were germane, we might address them together.
Okay, thank you. I presume, Mr. Langley, there's no action item needed on this issue?
There's none presented right now. Mr. Langley?
It's totally up. Is this on? Yeah, it is. Board Member Sasso, if he has no action today to take, then there's no need to take action. We can, when we get to that item, dispense of it there, or go ahead and move it up and move on from it today. But it sounds like, if I may, is that a direction to put an item on the next agenda for next week to deal with that issue?
I think I'd like to make that request now that we add to the next agenda. I know we are populating the next agenda at this meeting, so if we can add that item, I think that'd be beneficial.
All right.
Please.
I think Mr. Classy understands what that item is, and as long as there's no objection from the board, we'll add that to the next meeting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Classy, does that conclude your report?
It does, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so next we'll hear from Public Resources Advisory Group, also known as PRAG. Y'all may recall that the board at the last meeting retained this financial advisor to help us with some balance sheet analysis and P&L analysis. And what I've asked them here today to do is to present us with the scope of their assignment, tell us what they've done thus far, and provide us with any preliminary findings. And if you have any preliminary recommendations at this point, we'd like to hear those as well.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Wendell Gertner. I'm a Senior Managing Director with Public Resource Advisory Group, the district's financial advisor, and I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Marianne Edmonds. PRAG is a leading independent financial advisor firm serving state and local governments and their agencies and authorities. We're registered as a municipal advisor with the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. In Florida, PRAG advises a variety of counties, municipalities, authorities, and special districts. In our role as a financial advisor, we help governments position their financial operations, results, policies, and procedures to ensure financial stability and access to the capital markets. At this stage of our engagement with the district, our goal is to identify policies, practices, and procedures that reduce risk and enhance financial stability and transparency. We've embarked upon a deep dive of the district's finances, starting with the statutes, covenants, and policies that govern the district's financial operations. We've reviewed relevant documents, including meeting agendas, contracts, policies, financial statements, budgets, bond offering documents, and continuing disclosure postings. We've spoken with district administration, finance staff, external auditors, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, consulting engineer, and bond trustee. And we can provide references to the board of any of the documents that we reference here today. Financially, the district is subject to a number of statutes in addition to its charter that govern financial operations, including budgeting, property tax assessments and collection, and bonding. The district engages with general counsel, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, external auditors, and independent consulting engineers to ensure compliance with the appropriate statutes and financial regulations, as well as federal tax law. The district is also subject to covenants incorporated into its two bond programs: the bond resolution that controls the district's ad valorem bonds, and its trust indenture and bond resolution that controls its utility revenue debt. The covenants contained in the bond resolution and trust indenture are typical for those types of credits. They are known and familiar to staff, and bond counsel, disclosure counsel, and financial advisor help the district to ensure compliance with its debt covenants. In addition to disclosure counsel, the district has engaged a disclosure dissemination agent to assist in the district's continuing disclosure obligations. The district has also enacted formal board-approved financial policies, including a debt policy, post-issuance policy, disclosure policy, and investment policy. These policies appear appropriate, and we have not found any instance of non-compliance with these existing policies, as well as the relevant statutes and bond covenants. We do have the following observations. The district's financial statements are presented in accordance with the Governmental Accounting Standards Boards, and they have received an unmodified opinion from external auditors. The district's financial operations are divided into its governmental activities and its business type activities, which includes the utility. Within its governmental activities, the district has three major funds: the general fund, the debt service fund, and the capital projects fund. For fiscal year 2022, the district had approximately $187 million in expenditures within its governmental operations. 9% of the expenditures, representing $17.5 million, were for general government, included administrative, human resources, information systems and technology, and contracts and risk management. 24% of expenditures, representing $45 million, were for public safety, included building and safety and emergency services. 6% of expenditures, representing $10.4 million, were for physical environment. They included water control and planning and engineering. And 14% of expenditures, representing $26.4 million, were for transportation, including roadway maintenance and parking garages. The Capital Projects Fund comprised 16% of expenditures, representing $29.1 million, and capital project expenditures vary annually based on the issuance of ad valorem debt. Finally, the Debt Service Fund comprised 31% of governmental expenditures, representing $58.5 million. The district has $686.34 million in ad valorem debt outstanding, with $34.17 million due June 1st of 23. The debt matures June 1st, 2038, and the ad valorem debt is rated AA3 with stable outlook by Moody's and AA- with stable outlook by both Standard & Poor's and Fitch. The general fund and debt service fund expenditures are primarily funded with ad valorem property taxes, which represented 99.3% of revenues for fiscal year 22. Taxes on the Walt Disney Company related entities represent approximately 86% of the property taxes levied for this fiscal year. Expenditures from the Capital Projects Fund have been primarily funded with bond proceeds and have primarily funded roadways and parking garages. The district uses specialized budgeting software and follows a standard governmental budgeting process for Florida local governments. District administration and finance meet in April to go over the budget guidelines and timelines and budget priorities. Departments prepare their budget requests in May and must submit them to finance by June 9th. Administration and finance review the departmental budget requests, refine them in June and early July. The property appraisers of Orange and Osceola County provide the certified taxable value to all local governments by July 1st. At the June 26 board meeting, staff will present to the board for consideration the preliminary budget and maximum millage rate for inclusion in the trim notices. The maximum millage rate is due to the property appraisers by August 4th. The Board of Supervisors budget work session will be held August 23rd to refine the proposed budget, and preliminary and final budget hearings will be held September 13th and 27th, respectively, with the final approved budget effective for fiscal year beginning October 1st. We would want to point out this year, Finance Department is aware that budgeting for administrative expenditures should include an increase in costs due to the additional oversight activities of the district. Overall, the financial policies and budgeting processes for the district governmental operations appear appropriate, documented, and adhered to. There is one additional financial policy that we believe should be implemented to assist in the budgeting process, and that is establishment of a fund balance policy. Fund balance is the net position of the fund, and adequate levels should be maintained to mitigate current and future risks to help ensure stable tax rates. It can be thought of as the district's equity or reserves. Currently, the district has no policy on how much should be held in its fund balance to be able to respond to unexpected revenue shortfalls or increased cost. Even though the district has not had a fund balance policy, historically the district has maintained generally strong reserve levels, and a formal policy would formalize and memorialize those practices, and staff concurs with this recommendation. Given the change in the district's oversight and the risk associated with upcoming changes to past practices, it's even more essential to establish a policy to mitigate future risks. PRAG intends to work with staff and legal counsel to develop a fund balance policy for the board's consideration as it begins this year's budgeting process. On the utility side, the district owns and operates a combined utility system that includes electricity, water, wastewater, reclaimed water, chilled water, hot water, natural gas, solid waste, and recycling. The utility has $161.814 million of utility debt outstanding, with $22.678 million due October 1st, 2023. The utility debt includes bond issues and bank loans, with a final maturity on October 1st, 2038. The utility bonds are rated A- with stable outlook by Standard & Poor's, A with stable outlook by Fitch, and A1 with stable outlook by Moody's. Fitch states in their report dated March 9th, 2023, that the utility's financial position is, quote, very strong. For fiscal year 22, the utility had operating revenues of $170 million, debt service coverage ratio of 1.5 times, and unrestricted fund balance of $57 million. The Walt Disney Company related entities represent approximately 82% of the utility operating revenues received by the district in fiscal year 22. The financial operations of the utility are controlled by its trust indenture and bond resolution. The trust indenture is considered a closed indenture, which means all funds held under the indenture are restricted to supporting the utility system and cannot be used for any other purpose. The system is a combined system because under the trust indenture, all revenues from all operations are pledged to repayment of the bonds. The financial operation of the utilities are included in the district's audited financial report, and as required by the trust indenture, the district engages an independent engineering firm to prepare an annual report on the utility system. The most recent report available is dated as of September 30, 2021. The report as of September 2022 is in process. The annual report includes a report on the management of the properties, a report on the operating and maintenance of the properties, a report on the status of the operating budget, a report on the status of the construction fund, a report on the sufficiency of rates and charges for service, and a report on the condition of the system. The fiscal year 21 report concludes that, quote, nothing has come to our attention during the period reported on herein indicating that the district has failed in any material way to perform or comply with the covenants and agreements contained in the indenture and the bond resolution, end quote. From a financial perspective, this annual report is critical and should provide comfort to the district, its customers, and bondholders that the utility system is financially sound. Operationally, the district has contracted with Reedy Creek Energy Services, or RCES, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, to provide all operational services for the utility through a labor services agreement. The services provided by RCES include not only operations of the system, but also planning, analytical support, and oversight to include developing annual and long-term strategic plans, forecasts, and budgets, including rate setting for approval by the board. Historically, the contract was approved on an annual basis. However, on February 8, 2023, the current contract was amended and restated. The amended and restated labor services agreement extended the term through September 30, 2032, among other things, provided greater specificity in the services RCES provides. On February 22, 2023, the agreement was amended again to clarify the district's obligation to provide RCES with vehicles and buildings and equipment to perform its service. The district is charged by both statute and the trust indenture to set rates and fees that are just, equitable, and uniform, and that will provide for all expenses of operation and maintenance and debt service. It's our understanding that the district is not staffed to be able to review and opine on the reasonableness of the rates, operational costs, and capital needs of the system as proposed by RCES. From a policy perspective, we find it highly unusual that any government utility to rely on a third party related to its primary user for all services, including the recommended rate structure. The district is unable to verify the rates are equitable across all users, and proposed rates will be sufficient to maintain the system. According to the amended and restated agreement, RCES will provide the proposed scope of capital work, proposed scope of operational services, and the proposed operational service fee and fee cap to the district on or before July 1st, 2023. Our recommendation for the district is, given the complexity of the utility system and the district's statutory and legal obligation, the district needs to engage an independent utility rate consultant as soon as possible to be able to advise the district on the appropriateness of RCES's upcoming proposal for fiscal year 24, and assist in the rate-setting process and fee negotiations with RCES. The role of the utility rate consultant is different from the consulting engineer's role. The rate consultant is forward-looking as rates are proposed, while the consulting engineer is reviewing past operations and current status of the facilities. In order to engage a qualified rate consultant as quickly as possible, upon direction by the board, PRAG can conduct a competitive solicitation, and we would expect to bring a proposed firm as a subcontractor to PRAG for approval by the board at the May 10th meeting. Thank you.
Yep, before you walk away, let me see if my fellow board members have any questions. Any questions from my fellow board members? And before we get to your action item, I want to ask some questions and maybe provide some clarification to your comments. So everyone understands, last Friday afternoon, I learned for the first time about one of these new 11th hour agreements entered into between Disney and the district. This one relates to our utility services. And I found out late Friday afternoon, and essentially so that everybody understands that what Disney did is created another agreement, and we'll have to evaluate the legality of that agreement, but that essentially enables Disney to set their utility rates. In other words, Disney is going to tell the governing body, us, what utility rates they're going to pay and what everyone else in the district is going to pay, okay? That's, I've never heard of such a thing. That'd be like having all the CEOs of the utility companies in Florida on the Public Service Commission. And that's highly unusual. And because they have taken these extraordinary actions, we're going to have to do something that's being recommended to us, which is also highly unusual. That if these agreements stand up, we're going to have to hire our own independent consultants to evaluate the rates that Disney is going to dictate to us that they're going to pay and require other property owners in the district to pay. And so as I understand your recommendation, in order to do this timely, you're recommending that you do the legwork to identify the independent rate consultant. You'll do an RFP process, a competitive bidding process, and then you'll come back to the board and recommend such consultant. Okay, so do we have a motion from the board to authorize our financial advisors to take such action?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Please note that it passes unanimously. Let me just a few comments on your fine report. Let me make sure that everybody understands that because there's no fund balance accounting at the district under the old board, which based on my financial experience is also highly unusual, you always reserve for CapEx requirements. Well, the old board was not doing that, and so we're going to have to take new measures to make sure that that is done. And I've heard some numbers that we may be short on some accounts as much as $11.4 million. So what that means is that we're going to have to raise revenues to cover those reserves, okay, which means we're going to have to raise the millage rate. The other thing that I want everybody to understand, and one of the reasons that we brought in this capable financial advisor, is the process that the old board used to follow. Essentially, for budgeting, they relied on Disney to tell them what their budget was. And so, as it's been told to me, we just backed into the budget based on what Disney told us we should have as an annual budget. And as you've heard, our financial advisors are expediting the budgeting process. We're going to be doing budgeting in April. And as you will hear later in this meeting, we are going to be providing new and better services for the district. And because of that and the lack of fund balances that we're going to have to fund, I want everybody to understand that we're going to have to raise revenues, okay? and there's no way about it. Another reason we're going to have to raise revenues is because of the expenses that we're having to incur to deal with these illegal agreements that Disney entered into at the 11th hour, and you'll hear more about that later in this meeting. And then just finally, some of the things we're going to ask our financial advisor to do is help us with some balance sheet flexibility. We're going to look at things like monetizing some of our assets. And if we monetize some of our assets, that'll give us the balance sheet flexibility to pay off some or all of our debt, which will give us operationally more flexibility in terms of what we can recommend to the Florida legislature in terms of further changes they can recommend for this district. So if there are no other questions or comments from my fellow board members, yes, sir?
One clarification, I misspoke on the budget timeline. It's July 26th that the staff would present the board with the preliminary budget as scheduled.
Okay.
I think I said June.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, and thank you for your capable work. You know, in this meeting, you're going to hear about some services and potential operational changes that we as a board are going to evaluate in order to make this district function more equitably and be more prosperous and basically serve the public good better. You're also going to hear a presentation or a couple of presentations on these illegal agreements that Disney created, and you're going to hear from our litigation counsel on that point. But before our general counsel and litigation counsel present, I'd like to briefly explain why Disney's illegal agreements are detrimental to the public good and to the interest of the citizens of Florida. Further, I'd like to outline why the corporation's actions are inconsistent with the state legislatures, what they intended back in 1967 when they passed the Reedy Creek Improvement Act. So let's first take a step back into time. In 1967, the tax bases in Orange and Osceola counties were rather insignificant. So the Reedy Creek Improvement Act seemed like a decent deal. In exchange for special privileges, Disney would construct its kingdom to draw tourists, spark industry, generate jobs and revenue. But nobody, except other than perhaps Disney, believed that the act would live in perpetuity. Lo and behold, the increasingly powerful corporation was able to fortify its sweetheart deal through powerful lobbying and clever marketing for decades. Some of Disney's tactics and strategies are documented in a book titled Married to the Mouse, which was, take note, published 22 years ago. The book also argues why Disney, even back then, 22 years ago, no longer deserved the special privileges, why they were bad for Florida, and in many instances had ceased being a respectable corporate citizen. Disney's lobbying and marketing campaign succeeded for 55 years. It succeeded for more than a half a century. Above all, because nobody in Tallahassee was willing to shine a light on this arrangement. Then Governor Ron DeSantis courageously, and I repeat, courageously called it out for betraying not only fair market competition, but also the citizens of Florida. At this point, only Disney believes that the old Reedy Creek Improvement Act is a good deal for the Sunshine State. As such, it is especially shameful that Disney decided to take adversarial actions against the district even before this board was constituted. Before we learned about Disney's illegal contracts created at the 11th hour, our board was genuinely looking forward to working with Disney in a productive and collaborative manner to improve the functioning of the district. In this spirit, I want you to know that before these board members were appointed, they met with Disney's vice president in charge of external affairs to launch what they hoped and thought would be a mutually beneficial relationship. Unfortunately, when we were meeting with their VP, we were not told about these unlawful agreements. And what we didn't know is that they were not interested in abiding by the new legislation. Weeks later, we discovered these agreements. Our lawyer general counsel was able to turn them up, and we discovered that they didn't want to work with us like we wanted to work with them. Again, our board truly wished to work with Disney. Instead, the corporation decided that compromise was out of the question. It was Disney's way or the highway. This is why we were forced to hire litigation counsel, and you will hear more about that in this meeting. It is indisputable that this district requires meaningful changes on a variety of fronts. Indeed, the new board's charge from Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature is to ensure that the district finally is positioned to be more equitable and more prosperous, and thus better serve the citizens of Florida, particularly the citizens of Osceola and Orange County. Now, let me tell you, regardless of your politics, nobody should favor outdated legislation that elevates a corporation above the public good. In seeking to improve the functioning of this district, nothing is off the table with this board. And so there are a number of items that we now know that we are going to evaluate to make this district function better for everyone who works and plays in it and everyone who lives around it in the surrounding counties. Some of those items that we're going to evaluate, and I've just got 14 here. There's going to be many more as we hire more consultants. But we're going to evaluate creating new zoning to develop affordable and workforce housing. There's none of that in this district. I was shocked. I understand Disney has 75,000 to 100 employees working in the district that commute in and out every day. No affordable housing for them. No workforce housing for them. We're also going to look at creating voting rights for future residents in that housing. We're going to look at developing better traffic solutions for the surrounding county, including transit. We're going to look at reducing the carbon footprint created by the district. Think about the idea. You have 39 square miles, 25,000 acres, and you have 75,000 to 100 workers commuting in and out every day in their vehicles. Think about the carbon footprint. Think about how you could reduce that with the appropriate housing in the district. So these are all ideas that have been presented to us that we're going to evaluate. We're going to look at aligning the district's interests to join Osceola and Orange County to fight the many lawsuits that Disney has filed to avoid paying their own ad valorem taxes. And you will hear more about that in this meeting. We're also going to join the counties, and yes, the school boards, in efforts to create more funding for public schools in Central Florida. You're going to hear more about that too in a report later. We're going to evaluate regulating Disney like every other business in Central Florida. In other words, we're going to create a level playing field for everybody. I don't know how anybody can argue against that. We're going to look at charging utility rates that are not controlled by Disney, which you just heard. That was one of those 11th hour agreements that we're going to have to deal with. We're going to evaluate providing more transparency to the district's governance, implementing new accounting standards, establishing an independent government that's not exclusively controlled by Disney, increasing the district's revenues to provide new and improved government services, and for maintaining transparency and accountability that was not done under the old board. We're going to evaluate how to monetize some of the assets of the district and potentially pay off some or maybe all of our debts that will give the legislature more flexibility on how to make this district work better for the citizens of Central Florida. And then finally, we're gonna look at providing the governor and the legislature with a report before the next legislative session so that they can make more long-term changes to the legislation of this district to make sure that we serve the public good. So there's a lot coming, and you're going to hear about some of that here in this meeting. And so at this time, I'm going to ask two of our trial lawyers to talk about these illegal agreements. And first, Mr. Thompson will present, and then...
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt 1 second? Sorry to interrupt, but we do have another agenda item, which is the tide-based solar. You want to do that at the end?
Which?
We're still on reports. We're still on reports, John.
We're on reports?
We're on 7.3. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have Mr. Langley next. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and so before I introduce our trial counsel, I'm going to ask our general counsel, Mr. Langley, to please provide us with a report.
Good morning. I have a few items. Based on a review of the district's fire prevention code and in discussions with the fire department leaders, it appears to me that the fire prevention code of the district lacks enforcement mechanisms in ensuring that any violations of those codes are enforced and those problems fixed. Most local governments have in their code enforcement mechanisms to deal with violations of the fire code. This is lacking in the district's regulations. They're very lax. I would like consensus from this board to work with the fire department to develop and bring back for your consideration new regulations that implement code enforcement mechanisms to ensure that our fire prevention code can be enforced to the fullest extent of the law.
And do you need a motion in that regard?
As long as you are in consensus of me doing that, I'll work with them. I'll try to get it to you in the next month and a half or so. I'll try to expedite it. My goal is the May meeting, but we'll see what we can do.
Mr. Chair, a fire prevention code that can't be enforced or regulated doesn't seem to do any good for the public. So I'm all in favor of making sure that our fire prevention code is enforceable by our firefighters.
Any objections from this board?
None.
I think you've been instructed to proceed on that. Thank you.
Thank you, understood. Okay, my next item is, I know based on item 8.4 that there is an interest in securing an urban planning firm to assist the district in evaluating the comprehensive plan, land development regulations, growth management issues, and to provide that report that we're required to the legislature and the governor. I wanted to give the board an example of property that the district owns that is affected by that self-dealing restricted covenant document dated February 8, 2023. And if you would put up the slide that I brought. If you recall from my prior report, that restricted covenant purports to strip away all potential uses of district-owned property except those public and governmental purposes that existed as of February 8th, 2023. It also includes a whole list of prohibited uses on those properties. It also prohibits specifically any residential use. I put up on a slide property that the district owns, and this is just two examples. These are two parcels the district owns. There are 193 plus or minus acres, it might be a little more than that, owned by the district on Hartzog Road near the intersection of the 429 Western Beltway that are currently RIB sites, and that's the Rapid Infiltration Basin for the reclaimed water facility, and that's essentially fields where the reclaimed water is sprayed on vacant land, and it allows water to go into the aquifer. It's a good use, and it's necessary, but the district has a lot of land for that purpose, even on the other side of the 429. I think this is an example of where you have essentially a restricted covenant saying that forever we have to continue to spray water on vacant fields and not use it for any other public purpose. And this area is near the interchange of Western Way and the 429. It's about a half mile from that major intersection. This could potentially be even part of it. What Chair Garcia was talking about with workforce housing or affordable housing site that's close to Disney and other businesses in the district where employees could be within a little commute instead of driving 45 minutes to an hour away, stuck in traffic. Excellent traffic network there. However, these deed restrictions purport to say that this property can't be used by the district for anything other than spraying water on fields. So I just wanted to give you the real world example of how these documents affect the district's operations, legislative and executive functions, and determining what is in the best interest of the district and in the best interest of the residents of Central Florida. I don't have an action item on that, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. My next item is I wanted to talk about the fact that there are over 90 pending lawsuits in the Orange County Circuit Court against the Orange County property appraiser, this district, and the other taxing authorities of Orange County that were filed by Walt Disney Parks and Resorts USA, Disney Vacation Development, and several other taxpayers in this district, challenging the ad valorem tax assessment value of their properties, which would affect the amount of taxes that are paid in property taxes to all the taxing authorities. Disney's and the other plaintiffs in these cases, these 90 lawsuits, contest the value established by the Orange County property appraiser for several commercial properties during a 7-year period extended from 2015 to 2022. In those complaints, they allege the assessments do not represent just value of the parcels, and they claim that they exceed the fair market value of those properties. The taxes for these years have already been paid to all the taxing entities, including to the district. In the event that a judgment is entered in Disney's favor and the other taxpayers, that would result in a reduction of the assessed value of property, and the property appraiser would have to issue and provide to the tax collector and to the district something called certificates of correction that would compel the district and other taxing authorities to refund 7 years worth of rebates and taxes to Walt Disney World. Thus, the district has a substantial contingent liability of potentially having to refund millions of dollars to Disney if the Orange County property appraiser does not prevail in these lawsuits. The total potential refund amount has not been determined at this time. However, I received information that of an estimate of $11.4 million as a possibility, but it could potentially be a lot more than that, based on Disney's aggressive stances in these cases, attempting to lower their value by somewhere between 33 to 38%. I've even heard some attempts up to 50%. To avoid paying taxes to the Orange County public school system, to avoid paying taxes to Orange County, to avoid paying taxes to this district that serves it directly. I wanted to, if you could put up the next slide. In regards to the impacts to the Orange County public school system, I received public records from the Orange County tax collector indicating that Disney's property assessment lawsuits could cost our Orange County public school system anywhere between $52 million and $105 million for just the 7 years that they're suing on currently. The Orange County public school system has been reserving funds in anticipation of this contingent liability, and the school system has already been dramatically impacted by these lawsuits due to this requirement to reserve this money. I have on the screen snapshots of a letter sent by Orange County Public School Chair Jacobs and the Superintendent of Schools to Walt Disney World and to the Orange County property appraiser dated October 31, 2022. In that letter, the school system is essentially stating, please back off of these challenges. These lawsuits are already impacting our ability to operate our school system and to build schools. This letter went out in October. These lawsuits are still aggressively being pursued by Walt Disney World. In the last paragraph of this letter, you will see what the leaders of the school system are saying. If this lawsuit continues, if all these lawsuits continue, they will have a major impact on public school operations and capital projects that could result in public school construction plans being halted and termination of teachers and staff members and termination of important programs that educate the children. Again, these impacts to the public school system have not deterred Disney from attempting to get large tax refunds from the school system, from Orange County, or from this district. In addition to potentially triggering a large tax refund, a lower property assessment would result in lower tax collection in future years. So we're not talking about a one-time hit, we're talking about a hit for years to come. So I would point out to you that this is an issue that during your budgeting and millage adoption process you need to be aware of when setting the millage rate, to come up with sufficient funding to perhaps set aside reserves to address this potential impact. The Carlton Fields law firm has been representing the district in these lawsuits and was previously instructed by this district to just monitor these cases. I would like to seek this board's permission and direction to instruct Carlton Fields to aggressively defend these lawsuits, to support the Orange County property appraiser's stance evaluation for all of the properties being contested in these lawsuits, so that we can ensure that not only does this district have adequate funding sources, but our Orange County public schools are not hit in the way that they're telling Disney they will be hit. Do I have your consensus for that?
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
So moved, and I would also like to include in that with Mr. Langley and his firm's oversight of outside counsel at Carlton Fields, I certainly would like to include the authority for our attorneys to engage our own appraisal experts to support the appraisal of the Orange County property appraiser, ensure that we are actively involved in defending that appraisal and supportive by creating our own evidence and our own expert witness opinions. And again, defer to Mr. Langley and his firm on oversight and management of the outside counsel, but I'd like to include that as part of the authority that we're granting you.
Second.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
One more thing I'll mention is that the Act gives this district substantial eminent domain authority in order to acquire lands as necessary to implement the purposes of the Act. If the board desires, I can talk about that more at the next meeting. I don't have something prepared. I just wanted to mention that. because some of the things that the planning firms may come back with are some ideas or concepts that may need infrastructure to support those ideas. And so there may be a need to go beyond what the district already owns and acquire additional properties for those purposes. But at this time, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from the board relative to Mr. Langley's presentation?
I think I would like to add, Mr. Chair, that Mr. Langley prepare that presentation and bring it back to us at the next meeting so we can be fully briefed on his last remark.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just thank you for a great job. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The only comment I would make is what to me seems highly unusual that a government body would stand neutral in litigation when there's an opportunity to raise revenue for their district. And that needs to be understood, that the old board did nothing but sit idle in terms of helping or asserting in the litigation favorable help to Osceola and Orange County in the school districts. I've never seen such a thing. But our action item will cure that problem that was part of the old board's policy. Anything else with respect to this presentation, Mr. Langley?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from our trial counsel. We'll first hear from David Thompson and then from former Justice Lawson. And let me give a brief introduction. In the legal community, neither one of these two need any introduction. David Thompson is the managing partner of Cooper & Kirk, which is a premier litigation firm headquartered in Washington, D.C. He is nationally recognized for arguing regularly before the U.S. Supreme Court constitutional issues and issues across the country. He and his firm regularly go up against the nation's largest corporate entities, including Google, Microsoft, and Exxon. He's secured victories worth billions of dollars for his clients, and we're glad to have him on our team along with former Justice Lawson, former Florida Supreme Court Justice Alan Lawson, who founded the Lawson Law Firm. Before serving on the Supreme Court of Florida, he spent most of his career right here in our backyard in Central Florida, first as a trial court judge and then elevated to chief judge of the 5th District Court of Appeals. He has seen it all in terms of Florida law, both as a lawyer and as a judge at the trial court, appellate court, even at the Supreme Court level. And I don't know anybody more qualified to interpret Florida law than former Justice Lawson. So with those introductions, I'd ask Mr. Thompson to please present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On February 8th of this year, Disney and the outgoing supervisors of this district engaged in a blatant effort to attempt to subvert the will of the people of Florida in a backroom deal. For over 50 years, Disney had enjoyed a sweetheart deal that exempted it from the type of government regulation that every other business in the state complies with. The Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis sought to end that special treatment. They were committed to having Disney treated the same as all other businesses in the state. Disney responded by engaging in an illegal and indeed unconstitutional effort to extend the life of its sweetheart deal. But Disney's efforts are riddled with illegality, and they will not withstand judicial scrutiny. Procedurally, Disney and the prior board failed to adhere to the state sunshine laws. Specifically, they failed to mail notice to the other property owners in the district. The obligation to make such a mailing is crystal clear under the law of Florida, and Disney's failure dooms their entire effort to evade the will of the people of Florida. And there's a second procedural flaw in Disney's efforts. Under Florida law, a development agreement of this type can be entered into only if the district has put in place procedures to adopt such an agreement, and the Reedy Creek Improvement District neglected to do so. There are no such procedures in this district, and these purported contracts are therefore null and void for that reason alone. Substantively, the agreements are unconstitutional. Under Florida law, it's well established that governments cannot confer their own powers onto private parties. If they do so, that violates the private non-delegation doctrine. And here Disney attempted to use these contracts to seize for itself numerous governmental functions. Under these agreements, Disney would have the right to set the maximum height of buildings in the district. Disney would have all of the development rights to the exclusion of every other property owner in the district. And Disney would have the right to insist that roads be built regardless of the advisability of building such roads. Beyond the unconstitutionality, the development agreement and the restrictive covenants fail to comply with Florida's law of contracts. At the most basic level, they are blatant and obvious efforts to evade HB 9, and under Florida law, contracts that are inconsistent with public policy are null and void. And in addition, these contracts violate the unconscionability doctrine. They are completely one-sided. Disney takes governmental powers for itself for decades and offered the district precisely nothing in return. The bottom line is that Disney engaged in a caper worthy of Scrooge McDuck to try to evade Florida law. Its efforts are illegal, and they will not stand. And now I'd like to turn the presentation over to former Justice Alan Lawson, who will address certain aspects of what I've covered, and then I'll come back and hit the other points. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. On May 12th, 1967, I turned 6. An event of little consequence that passed without any fanfare outside the humble home owned by my parents in Tallahassee. That same day, however, the Florida legislature created the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and that event was widely covered nationwide in the press because it was so unprecedented and groundbreaking. The press recognized that the Disney company would be able to build a massive entertainment complex with theme parks, hotels, other facilities without being subject to independent local government regulations that applied to everyone else. From the media accounts, it seemed that most, particularly in Florida, viewed this as a positive, seeing the district as an innovative way for the Disney company to bring to reality the beloved Walt Disney's dream of a self-contained community of the future. Even then, however, critics, especially those in states that had a lot more experience with for-profit corporations of a large scale, raised concerns about the potential lack of oversight and accountability for the district, with some questioning the soundness of the public policy that would hand a for-profit corporation this kind of unprecedented control over its own local government. Whatever the public opinion, however, that was the law. Disney and its shareholders were able to benefit from that unique arrangement until the Florida legislature acted to sunset the Reedy Creek Improvement Company. As a 6-year-old, of course, I had no opinion on the wisdom or propriety of the 1967 enactment, and irrespective of what Disney thinks or anyone else thinks about the sunsetting of the district, it is the law. And that fact is the starting point for any legitimate analysis of the events that we're here to discuss. After all, the whole point of our constitutional republic is that we're all equally subject to the law. Early in my judicial career, I presided over more than 100 criminal jury trials. One of the most solemn responsibilities that I had was instructing each jury immediately before it began its deliberations and this is what I would say. In closing, let me remind you that it is important that you follow the law spelled out in these instructions in deciding your verdict. There are no other laws that apply to this case, and even if you do not like the laws that must be applied, you must use them. For more than 2 centuries, we have lived by the Constitution and by the law. No juror has the right to violate rules that we all share. Having served for 22 years as a judge and then justice, I can tell you that I've never seen a more blatant and hostile attempt on a scale like this to openly thwart the law. A governmental entity acting at the behest of a private for-profit corporation and attempting to contract away its governmental powers, brash, breathtaking, and unlawful for the reasons that David previewed and will discuss in more detail next. Before I turn this over to David, I want to walk through one of the most glaring and obvious procedural defects that renders void this attempt to evade the rules that we all share. It's been widely reported and talked about here that the mechanism used by the Reedy Creek Improvement District and Disney was a development agreement. Development agreements are provided for in Chapter 163 Florida statutes in a part known as the Florida Local Government Development Agreement Act. If you could put up the first slide. If you can see that, you'll see that the agreement that we're talking about that was entered on February 8th is entitled the Walt Disney World, Chapter 163, Development Agreement. And it outlines in the whereas clauses, beginning with the 12th recital, that the Disney Creek agreement was entered into for the maximum amount of time allowed by that chapter. It recites that development agreements are used all over Florida, which is certainly true. And then it confirms that this agreement is entered pursuant to that statute. Next slide. And then again, in the very first section, Section 1, subsection C, authority for the agreement, it states this agreement is entered into pursuant to the authority of the Florida Local Government Development Act. Next slide. That act has very clear requirements as to what a local governmental entity must do before it can enter any development agreement. Those are found in Section 163.322 Florida statutes entitled Public Hearings. Florida has broad government in the sunshine laws that require important actions to be taken in the sunshine at public hearings, and the action of entering into a development agreement is no exception. You'll see here that before a local government can enter a development agreement, it has to conduct at least 2 public hearings in the sunshine. And Reedy Creek did hold 2 public hearings. However, an important precursor to any public hearing that must be held in the sunshine is notice. You'll see here that Section 163.322 requires 2 types of notice. First, notice in a newspaper of general circulation. You've seen newspapers, maybe not in a long time, but in the very back there are all these little notices that just are all over the place. And you question whether in today's world that's very effective to let anybody know what's going on. But more importantly, you'll see, and Reedy Creek did that. They did publish notice in a newspaper. You'll see, highlighted in yellow, that notice of intent to consider a development agreement shall also be mailed to all affected property owners before the first public hearing. Without a notice that alerts those who have an interest in the action that's going to be taken, appearing in the sunshine is nothing but a facade. That second notice, that mailed notice, never happened. Those most directly affected by and that would have seen and taken note of what Reedy Creek and Disney were about to do together never had that opportunity because that notice was never sent. That's, of course, important for two reasons. One is the practical reason that as you can tell from what's been discussed here today, these agreements substantially affected and would affect Central Florida if they were left in place. They substantially and directly would affect the other property owners in this area in the ways that David outlined and we'll talk about later. But secondly, even more importantly, as a legal matter, next slide, Florida law requires strict compliance by local governments with notice requirements, and the failure to comply with them means that the governmental action is null and void, or put another way, void ab initio. It doesn't matter whether property owners would have objected or anybody would have shown up for the hearing. It is so important, the law says that if the notice is not given, it is as if the action taken at that facade of a meeting never occurred. Black's Law Dictionary defines void as of no legal effect, void ab initio, of no legal effect from the first moment that a contract is entered into. And that is perhaps the easiest issue that can be explained as to why these agreements will fall, already have fallen. They have no legal effect. David will go through the others. But I'd also like to add that a void development agreement also invalidates the restrictive covenants because, and I could put up the same whereas clauses, but in the interest of time, we won't. But as recited in the restricted covenants themselves, they were entered into in furtherance of and in consideration of the development agreement, and that development agreement is void as if it was never entered. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. There's a second procedural defect with the development agreement. Prior to 1986, districts were not able to enter into these types of arrangements. And the legislature in 1986 empowered districts to enter into development agreements, but they did so on a condition. They required the district by ordinance to put in place procedures governing the adoption of these types of agreements. And counties around the state have done so. Miami-Dade, Jacksonville, but Reedy Creek failed to do so. There are no such procedures, even though it is a statutory precondition to entering into any development agreement. And this development agreement is a perfect example of why there should be procedures and why the Florida legislature in 1986 insisted on this. Here, the development agreement was drafted by Disney. Here, there was no meaningful staff-level review of the agreement. And the board voted and approved the development agreement based on Disney's representations about the agreement. The fact is that this failure to have these procedures in place is a second independent basis for concluding that these agreements are null and void. And as Alan said, the restrictive covenants themselves are premised on the adoption of the development agreement. So if the development agreement falls, it necessarily follows that the restrictive covenants fall as well. Now, there are a myriad of problems with the restrictive covenants, which I'll get to in a few moments, but the two are tied in that way. There are also substantive flaws with these agreements. It's well established under Florida law that a development agreement and a restrictive covenant is a contract, and thus is governed by the law of contract. And so that's an issue, and I will explore that in some detail. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the unconstitutionality of these agreements, because these agreements purport to confer onto Disney governmental authority. And under the private non-delegation doctrine, a government, a district, cannot confer governmental authority onto a private party. Here, the development agreement provides if there is any conflict between the agreement and the district's land development regulations, this agreement shall prevail. That's an astonishing grant of authority. That's saying that even if there are regulations that have been adopted by the district that have the force of law, that this agreement trumps those laws. And that's not all. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, Disney also takes for itself the basic zoning power to identify how tall the buildings can be in the district. They also take for themselves all of the development rights and entitlements. And Disney, under these agreements, is the only one allowed to, quote, assign portions of the master development rights and entitlements to other landowners, close quote. So Disney takes these governmental functions for itself. Disney also obligates the district to fund, design, and construct public facilities to accommodate Disney's growth. And it does so without giving the district the opportunity to reassess. Now, some may say, well, wasn't there a comprehensive plan? Isn't this just mirroring what's in the comprehensive plan? And that would be fallacious for a number of reasons. First of all, it's just not true in the sense of this has a date that goes well beyond the comprehensive plan. It extends that by a long period of time. It assigns the exclusive development rights to Disney. That wasn't in the comprehensive plan. And of course, the restrictive covenants place all sorts of restrictions upon the district that were not in the comprehensive plan. And so Disney cannot hide behind the comprehensive plan as a justification for the development agreement. And all of this is to say these agreements are unconstitutional. But they also violate the basics of contract law in three separate ways. First, at a most basic level, they are a blatant effort to evade HB 9. And under Florida law of contracts, contracts that are inconsistent with public policy are null and void. The legislature was trying to empower this district to take back authority from Disney, and Disney has tried to thwart that and indeed exacerbate that by taking even more powers that it did not have before. So that's one way in which these agreements are inconsistent with the law of contracts. The second is unconscionability. Under Florida law, there's a strong public policy that when a contract is inconsistent with public policy, it's unconscionable. And you look at both procedural and substantive unconscionability. Here, with respect to procedure, we see self-dealing. We see a prior board that was handpicked by Disney. We heard what the selection process looked like from one of the public commenters. And in addition, the supervisors, the prior board, they had to own land in the district to serve. Where did that land come from? Disney, on a temporary basis, gave them use of the land. So that's self-dealing. And that's a hallmark under the case law of unconscionability from a procedural perspective. But there was also a lack of independent counsel for the district. The lawyer for the district has been working with Disney on real estate matters. To his credit, he disclosed this, but that doesn't change the fact that he has been working for Disney for some time now. And I'd like to show a series of slides that we've unearthed in our investigation. These are internal emails that we have discovered since we've been retained. And the first one shows that Disney's effort to obscure that it drafted the development agreement by having the district's lawyer, who, as I just mentioned, works for Disney too, put his name on as the drafter. You can see the subject. It says developer agreement. Chapter 163. This email at the bottom is from John McGowan in his, he says he's the chief counsel in the legal department of Walt Disney World. And we can see that he says in the body of it, my name is currently at the top of the document, that's the development agreement, as the drafter. And I'm comfortable having my name on it. But from an optics perspective, that is not ideal. And it would be better to have a non-Disney employee be the drafter. So we see Disney doing the drafting and then trying to cover it up right away. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see the same was true of the restrictive covenants. Here we can see that originally it says that it's John McGowan, that's the in-house Disney lawyer we just saw, it was listed as prepared by and returned to, and then that struck out, and then they put in the district's lawyer instead, and you can see that in the red line. If we look at the next slide, we can see that the Disney in-house lawyer also edited the development agreement agenda for the district's board meeting. We can see the subject line forward, agenda for January 25, 2023 BOS meeting. And we can see that this is from John McGowan, the in-house Disney lawyer. And we can see, he says in the first line, I would also suggest modifying the agenda item as follows. So Disney's lawyer is literally writing the agenda for the board meeting. If we look at the next email, we can see that the same Disney in-house lawyer edits the talking points relating to the restrictive covenants for the administrator. And so here again, Disney is pulling the strings, and all of that is procedurally highly irregular and would satisfy the requirements of procedural unconscionability. But beyond these procedural irregularities, there also is substantive unconscionability. The touchstone is looking to see, is an agreement unreasonably unfavorable to one party? The factors you look at are the length of the agreement and the benefits that flow to both parties. And here we can see that the benefits that Disney has taken for itself are one-sided and substantial. And we've covered them, whether it's the zoning or the building of the roads or the veto over the district's own alteration or use of its property. Under the restrictive covenants, they even take the ability to censor the speech of the district on its own property. And the benefits are long-term. And in return, the district received nothing, received absolutely nothing. Now, Disney may say, well, you know, we agreed not to sell our land at more than fair market value to the district. Guess what? You were never going to have to pay more than fair market value for the value of the land. So this is totally illusory, and it is totally meaningless, and the district received nothing in return. And not only does that render these contracts substantively unconscionable, but there's a separate requirement under Florida law that a contract has to have consideration. And these contracts do not have that. Indeed, the restrictive covenants don't even purport to have a peppercorn of consideration. Now, if we look at those restrictive covenants, in addition to not having any consideration, and in addition to suffering from all the unconscionability factors that we've just looked at the development agreement, there are two other points I'd like to make. Number one, under Florida law, restrictive covenants are not binding on governmental entities. Under Florida law, we don't want governments having their hands handcuffed by private parties in contracts. And so it's crystal clear that restrictive covenants simply do not have any force or effect vis-a-vis this governmental entity. And there's another problem, that these restrictive covenants are once again a violation of the private non-delegation doctrine. We can look at section 2.1 of the covenants. They restrict the district to use its property solely for the uses that it is currently being used for. We saw that in Dan's presentation. In addition, under section 3, the district cannot alter its property without Disney's review and consent. And the covenants even restrict the district's own speech on its own property. This is Disney setting itself up as a censor in violation of the private non-delegation doctrine. No private party has that right. The bottom line is that Disney's efforts are riddled with procedural impropriety and illegality, and they are riddled with substantive impropriety and illegality. And we are confident that both the development agreement and the restrictive covenants will not withstand any judicial scrutiny. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Thompson and Justice Lawson. Very powerful presentation. And as I said earlier, it really is shameful what Disney tried to do. At this point in the agenda, we're going to hear from some state agencies. I understand that there's a representative from DOT, DPR, and DOH. And what I'd ask is first the representative from DOT to please step up and give your name and provide us with your presentation.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. My name is Will Watts. I'm the Assistant Secretary over Engineering and Operations for the agency. So our primary focus in the agency is to lead the transportation system and manage one of the most comprehensive transportation systems in the country. Just a reminder of our mission is to provide a safe transportation system that ensures the mobility of people and goods, enhances economic prosperity, preserves the quality of our environment and communities. As a part of that mission, we ensure the transportation system is interconnected and supports a multimodal network consisting of air, rail, sea, spaceport, transit, and the ever-expanding deployment of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. As Florida's transportation system impacts every aspect of daily living, maintaining strategic relationships with both public, private, and quasi-governmental partners are paramount. This includes regional organizations and special districts like the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Our relationship with the prior Reedy Creek Improvement District is unique compared to any other entity in Florida. For transportation and infrastructure related matters, Reedy Creek received the best of both worlds, the private and the government worlds. And we're not subject to the same oversight in terms of uniform protocols and standards or local standards as specified in the Florida Green Book, which sets minimal standards for transportation. This was first addressed during the recent special session by removing the requirement for the department to first seek approval from the Reedy Creek when determining where to place intersections, how to build thoroughfares, or design and construct standards for access and connecting to other state roads, including US 192, State Road 535, and Interstate 4. The concept that a private entity could unduly influence a state and/or federal funded highway project is an exception to the rule and not in the public's best interest. The legislation also added substantial requirements for the district when attempting to construct or impact state or federal land within its boundaries. This brings the new Central Florida Tourism Oversight Board and the same standards expected of all local entities, local governments. Over the years, Reedy Creek Improvement District has been quick to attempt to influence the department's decision-making by removing Reedy Creek's exclusive authority to acquire, construct, and maintain public roads within the district by way of their self-appointed board. Commuters within the Central Florida region can be rest assured that their best interests will be taken into account when it comes to transportation-related development decisions. In addition to the aforementioned changes, there are several additional items the board may want to consider when determining how to best maintain the best interests of the public as you continue to settle in your new roles as members. As you begin to dig into the long history of the agreements between state agencies and the prior Reedy Creek Improvement District, there are some conceptual comparisons of what has typically looked like when we work with different partners, none of which are consistent when working with Reedy Creek. So we're going to talk a little bit about safety. The first category we want to talk about is structural safety. So anytime structures are over state roads or under state roads, such as bridges or tunnels, we require ourselves and any government entity to inspect bridges every 2 years. We increase that inspection frequency as we need to based on the condition of the structure. As a state agency, we also self-impose for safety structural inspections for large sign structures and signal structures like trestles or traffic mast arms, and we would inspect those every 5 years for public safety. As a reminder, the roadways operating throughout the district with limited exceptions are under your control. And as far as roadway safety, every public entity is required to follow the Federal Highway Administration Manual on Uniform Traffic Control. And local entities are subject to also the Florida Green Book by statute. This essentially requires all entities to develop standards to meet minimal expectations as well as experiences for all drivers on the highway system. After a long day at the theme park, commuters should be provided the same standards they are familiar with, whether they're within Reedy Creek or traveling on other public roads. Transit safety is also very important. Required regulations and inspections and FTOT oversight over fixed guideway systems, ferries, and other transits used by the public. Similarly, quasi-private entities which receive taxpayer dollars, such as airports, are subject to these inspections. As the governor mentioned earlier this week, the monorail system and its structures are one of the few systems in the state and the country that are not reviewed or inspected by any government entity. This was highlighted also by the National Transportation Safety Board in 2009. The agency has experts throughout the modes of public transit, including bus transportation, and we're happy to provide additional information to you. A couple other areas I want to highlight. One is maintenance. As a state agency, we maintain, of course, all of our infrastructure. That starts with a good inventory of what's out there. Of course, maintenance also includes pothole repairs, repaving, and pavement markings. It also includes mowing, litter cleanup, signage repair and maintenance, lighting, safety features such as guardrail, as well as drainage conveyance systems. ITS maintenance and operations as well as traffic signals. So there's quite a bit of inventory out there that you do have to maintain. Permitting, when dealing with fellow governmental entities, state law prevails, which means government does not pay for fees for permitting with local jurisdiction because it is public use. When engaged in a private entity, government entities must pay fees because they are impacting private property rights. Currently, it's looking like FDOT could have to pay nearly $2 million to link up to the Reedy Creek drainage system if we make any I-4 improvements. This is another example how they are receiving the best of both worlds, even though this construction is for the benefit of the traveling public. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions or comment from my fellow board members? Well, thank you for your report, and thank you for the valuable service that you provide to the citizens of Florida. And I can assure you that this board welcomes you and your department and your services in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Next, I'd like to hear from DPR. And the representative, please state your name and tell us the agency you're representing.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Brian McManus. I am the Deputy Secretary for the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. DVPR is responsible for ensuring that more than 1.6 million licensees across more than 30 fields of industry provide safe and quality services to Florida's millions of residents and visitors. Florida's population has more than tripled since the 1970s, adding more than 3 million people every decade. And under Governor DeSantis' leadership, our team at DVPR has worked diligently to enhance and improve the department's services to provide a smooth and efficient experience for residents, visitors, business owners, and licensed professionals. Our mission is to license efficiently, regulate fairly. We implement this every day by helping businesses open their doors and creating a pro-business climate to support all of our licensees. Vital duties of the agency include safeguarding the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Florida, combating unlicensed activity, ensuring professionalism through education. DVPR is organized into two parts. Our business regulation side, we have the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco, the Division of Condominiums, Timeshares, and Mobile Homes, the Division of Drugs, Devices, and Cosmetics, and the Division of Hotels and Restaurants. Our professional regulation side includes the Division of Real Estate, the Division of Certified Public Accounting, the Florida Athletic Commission, the Division of Regulation, and the Division of Professions, which administers 12 professional boards, 1 council, 1 commission, 5 department-regulated professions, and a Florida Building Code. We license professionals ranging from cosmetologists, veterinarians, real estate agents, and geologists to talent agents, certified public accountants, and contractors. We have nearly 1,600 employees in 13 offices throughout the state to directly oversee and support Florida businesses and professionals. Our Division of Hotels and Restaurants licenses and inspects all public food service and lodging establishments in the state. We inspect hotels and motels twice a year, and we inspect restaurants between 1 and 4 times per year based on risk. During these inspections, we evaluate everything from sanitation and cleanliness to compliance with state human trafficking awareness laws, which, thanks to the ongoing leadership of the governor and the Florida legislature in recent years, requires hotels to post information about human trafficking and to formally train their staff to spot signs of human trafficking. Given the target audience for businesses within the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, compliance with the human trafficking awareness requirements is incredibly important, and we take this responsibility very seriously. We estimate there are 359 permanent food service establishments and 28 hotels and motels in the district. Inspection of these establishments over the last 15 months have yielded over 3,300 violations, which include 393 high-priority violations. The category of high-priority violations is considered to be capable of directly contributing to foodborne illness or injury. This is just one example of how important maintaining proper sanitation standards are for the safety of our residents, visitors, and workers. Though DVPR has the authority to conduct unscheduled inspections, as is the norm across the state, certain licensed premises within this district have recently attempted to coordinate the times inspections are scheduled, as well as insist on only one inspector having access to licensed premises at a time. Normally, our inspectors do not encounter this type of resistance when they are conducting business elsewhere, and we have seen these instances escalate in the last 6 to 12 months. This has been a noticeable change in feedback from our Central Florida inspectors. DVPR also issues alcohol licenses to our Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco, also known as ABT. In this district, there are at least 40 alcohol licenses obtained through the Special Act and an additional 17 licenses obtained through general law. At this time, we do not anticipate changes to the Special Act impacting the 40 licenses. ABT inspects licensed premises to ensure compliance with state laws, which include beverage laws such as only selling to adults 20 years of age or older, ensuring alcohol is sold at licensed premises such as bars, restaurants, pool areas, room service, and others. Alcohol licensees must maintain compliance with all state laws and local ordinance, and as there have been past violations involving the sale of alcohol to underage persons in the district, inspection of these licensed premises are quite important. Any changes in local zoning by this board can impact licensees, and DVPR is responsible for enforcing compliance with any zoning changes. Other license categories of note under our jurisdiction include veterinary clinics and healthcare clinic establishments, which are able to access prescription drugs, including opioids. We also enforce child labor laws and elevator safety. There are 3 licensed veterinary establishments and 3 healthcare clinic establishments in the district. There are also certain child labor requirements regarding employees under the age of 18, such as allowable hours to work and mandatory breaks. Businesses looking to employ children as part of an entertainment show or attraction are required to obtain a child labor permit from the department. Additionally, our Bureau of Elevator Safety works to ensure elevators and escalators throughout the state of Florida remain safe. And regarding elevators, via an MOU with the department, the district has been allowed to process applications internally for permits of installations and or alterations of elevators, and this is separate from DVPR's licensing system. The district has been allowed to conduct oversight for inspector compliance with inspection standards for elevators, escalators, and moving walkways. They have been allowed to correct any deficient performance by inspectors through direct employment or contractual relationships, and they have in the past been allowed to grant variances and waivers regarding the Florida Elevator Safety Code. Monthly activity reports are required to be submitted to DVPR and include the number of inspection types, accidents, and complaints. The district, we understand, has 3 employees dedicated to conducting the inspections required by the MOU. Should this agreement be terminated, the agency would assume the responsibilities. This is a 10-year agreement and will expire on June 30th, 2030. We have identical MOUs in place with Broward County, Miami-Dade County, the City of Miami, and the City of Miami Beach. However, those local governments' relationships to the businesses in their jurisdiction are different than that of the previous board here. If the new State Control Board wants to reevaluate the MOU and direct DVPR to perform the duties which were delegated to the previous board, we're certainly happy to do so. We share the governor's vision and the board's desire to ensure everything within district boundaries and across the state complies with state law. Protecting the health and safety of the residents and visitors of our state is our top priority. Thank you again for the time today, and if you already members of the board have questions about our regulatory authority in the district, I'm happy to take those.
Or comments from my fellow board members?
Thank you.
Well, let me thank you for your report and thank you for the valuable service you provide to the citizens of Florida, and assure you that this board welcomes and expects you to regulate everyone within the district just like you're regulating those outside of the district. Next, we have someone from DOH. Please come forward.
Good morning, Chair and Board. My name is Wissam Corey, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Health. I was born and raised right outside Orlando, so it's a pleasure to be home to discuss this critical issue with you all today. Many travel from around the globe to experience Orlando just once. I was lucky enough to grow up within an hour of the best attractions in the world. From WonderWorks on International Drive to swimming with dolphins at Discovery Cove, Central Florida is home to experiences like any other. These experiences are a cornerstone of my childhood and truly very precious to me. They are a monument to Florida and something that should always be cherished and protected. To protect the unique resources of our beautiful state, there must be checks and balances. Government, law and order, and consistency is a central component of that protection. I'm here to talk to you today about the Department of Health's role in that protection of Floridians and visitors, and how this is essential to ensuring the safety and success of tourism and hospitality, specifically in Orlando. An essential element of the department is the ability to collect and assess data and develop evidence-based approaches to the protection of health and wellness. By having population-based data surrounding disease outbreaks, injury risks, and healthcare standards, the department is able to identify issues in public health, develop mitigation strategies, and develop regulation to prevent risk to our communities. Swimming pools are a prime example of this. To protect from the risk of disease and injury at public swimming pools, the department has regulatory authority over operations of public pools and inspections. This is outlined in Florida Administrative Code and Florida statutes. For these pools and water parks in Florida, including at theme parks and their hospitality counterparts, the Department of Health regulations include water quality and chemistry, pool cleanliness and safety measures, proof of contract with pool service technicians or proof of pool operator training, pool maintenance records, location and condition of bathroom facilities, because improper maintenance of pools can result in injury, illness, drowning, and even death. High-volume pools and water parks, including those at Disney, are prime areas for infections among open wounds, illnesses as a result of improper handling of fecal matter, injuries, drownings, and sometimes the tragic death of children. Sadly, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death for children ages 1 to 4 in Florida. In 2021, 98 children were victims of drowning in the state among various water bodies. This is why water safety is essential in our state and why standardized operation and regulation prevents these strategies, especially by requiring safety infrastructure in pool areas. Sufficient pool chemistry is not only essential for maintenance, but to prevent the spread of illness. Waterborne disease and parasite outbreaks like Giardia, Legionnaires, E. coli, and Cryptosporidium are culprits among high-volume pools. Legionnaires specifically has a 10% mortality rate, for example. So it's especially critical to ensure that the chemistry of all pools in Florida are maintained at the same standard. Outlined in Florida Administrative Code, the department's protocols for public high-volume pools and water parks are in place to mitigate these risks, minimize incidents, and outline corrective actions. The difference between Disney and other properties? Through Reedy Creek, Disney is solely responsible for reporting and management of any incidents. Disney addressed their complaints in-house, creating risk of conflicts of interest. There are 267 pools on Disney World properties that were delegated to Reedy Creek for inspection under this sovereign authority. To put that into perspective, Universal Studios properties only have around 40. Ensuring the health and safety of 267 pools requires uniquely trained and well-organized resources and management. I think we can all agree on that. Our county health departments are built to manage this. We conduct over 100,000 inspections annually at 42,000 facilities statewide. 267 pools are less than a 10% increase in Orange County alone, which our team is prepared to absorb. Since 1996, the department is aware of over 7,000 violations on Disney property. Since pool inspections were delegated to Disney in 2014, over 3,000 violations occurred. Disney was the judge and jury for these incidents since 2014, and the state is only aware of what was reported to us. There was no ability for confirmation or assessment to ensure protocol was followed. Essentially, there was no external oversight for the pools and water parks, aside from Disney themselves. By eliminating special jurisdiction, the Department of Health has resumed the work of the Reedy Creek Swimming Pool Inspection Program. This will allow us, as a third party, to ensure safety of Floridians and visitors to prevent injuries and illness. Protecting the health and safety of Floridians is our core mission. This mission also provides authority over healthcare licensure in Florida, including within the boundaries of Reedy Creek. This has never been an exception. Within the department, the Division of Medical Quality Assurance is responsible for regulatory activities of various healthcare practitioners and facilities. Within the confines of Celebration alone, over 1,000 healthcare professionals are licensed by the department. That includes doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, and even EMTs and paramedics we've heard from today. And I also wanted to say, I'm very glad that your teammate is okay, and thank you for your service. All licensees are required to meet criteria and scopes of practice determined by the department and their subsequent boards. Could you imagine if your doctor or nurse was exempt from the same standards as other providers in Florida? Or if the enforcement varied as you crossed geographical boundaries? That's not the case. Under this authority, the department is able to issue restrictions or suspensions through emergency orders if a practitioner poses an immediate serious danger. That authority is essential and protects Floridians daily from any unsafe healthcare. This oversight also feeds into our license verification database, which is an online resource that provides Floridians with the ability to check the status of any licenses, complaints, and any disciplinary action of their providers, allowing Floridians to remain informed and make safe decisions for their needs. Government oversight of all entities in Florida, including Disney, should match this structure. Facilities of much smaller scope are also regulated by the department. For example, massage therapists and establishments are regulated by the department. Reedy Creek is home to a few massage establishments licensed by the department and has always been required to meet standards under Florida law. With this authority, we are able to detect, investigate, and halt criminal activity conducted through massage establishments and fraudulent practitioners. Regulations require that massage establishments pass inspections conducted by the department ourselves, provide proof of insurance coverage, ensure human trafficking training and reporting procedures, and comply with background screening requirements, which does not allow for ownership or management by any individual who has been charged with any heinous crimes, including but not limited to sexual assault, prostitution, human trafficking, or child abuse. Overall, the department's authority shows that checks and balances are in place to protect the health and safety of our communities. It also supports transparency and accountability for our residents and visitors. This requires a partnership between the public and private sectors. Our role is to protect the health and safety of Floridians and visitors alike when they enjoy all that Florida has to offer. We all have the shared intention of supporting the unique experiences available in Florida. We look forward to working with you as the board as we continue this mission together. Thank you for your time.
Are there any comments or questions from my fellow board members? I would like to thank you for that wonderful report and thank you for the very valuable services that you provide to the citizens of Florida. And I can assure you that our board supports your providing these services of health, safety, and transparency within the district. And we look forward to seeing you and your agency here in the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes the reports. We'll now go to new business. Item 8.1. A couple weeks ago, I received a call from the Inspector General, who is conducting a civil and criminal investigation into the past activities here at the district, and she asked me if our financial advisor would cooperate with her department, and I said, of course, and so I contacted our financial advisor and was advised that they would like a direction from the board for their permission to cooperate with the Inspector General. So I think I'll ask for a motion to that effect. Yes, Mr. Langley?
So moved.
Yeah, would like you to include in that motion also direction to the district staff in addition to just the Prague consultants?
Yes. So not only our financial advisor, but everyone in the staff to cooperate with the Inspector General. So is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second? Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item, 8.2, which is a report from management on a Fourth Amendment to the Tide Bay Solar Facility.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, fellow members of the board. My name is Ray Crooks. I am a member of the Business Affairs team for Reedy Creek Energy Services. Our responsibility is to plan for the long-term energy supply for the district as well as natural gas supplies. So this morning we're going to talk about a solar project that's associated with Amendment 4. Next slide, please. Just some brief information about the project. The project is called the Tide Bay Solar Project. It's going to be in Polk County, Florida. The developer of the project is Oregis Energy, which is a actually an internationally recognized solar developer. They have many projects in the country as well as outside of the continental United States. They're located in Miami, Florida. The project is going to be in Polk County, Florida, and it's going to be roughly on Highway 555 and Highway 603 in Polk County, right at that corner near Duke Energy's transmission facilities. It's going to be a total capacity of 75 megawatts, and it's going to serve the projection at the time when we presented this to the board. It was supposed to be online in January 1st, 2023. There's a purchase power agreement in place that the board signed back in June 2020. It's a 20-year agreement, and the estimated savings at the time that we went to the board was about $173 million over a 20-year period, roughly $8.7 million savings per year. And again, as I said, it was approved by the board on June 20th, 2020. Next slide. The district has pursued a portfolio of renewable resources for quite some time now, seeking, as the chair said earlier, to minimize its carbon footprint. These projects definitely do that and add to that objective of the board. We have facilities here on property called the Citrus Ridge facility. You can see that driving down the 429. And if you drive down World Drive here on property as well, you'll see a solar facility that was developed by Duke Energy that has the shape of Mickey's head, if you will. But we work with Duke Energy in the development of that project. The other ones that are being contemplated here, and we'll discuss the Tide Bay project here in a minute, but there's two others that were being contemplated. The first one is Tide Bay, which we're going to talk about, which is in Polk County, and the second one, which we were planning at that time and having discussions, is called the Bella Ridge Solar Facility, which is going to be located in Gilchrist County, which is kind of northwest of Gainesville, Alachua County. Next slide, please. whenever evaluations are done with respect to resources for a portfolio, specifically the districts, we have to make sure we understand what the natural gas market is doing. Natural gas is the predominant fuel for generation in the state of Florida. Roughly 50 to 60% of electricity generation comes from natural gas. So whatever we're doing, we have to kind of evaluate it with respect to what natural gas prices are forecasted to be and how our project or proposed projects will be impacted by it. When we originally thought about this in late 2018, going into 2019, the NYMEX futures market was about $2.65. And we subsequently, before the board meeting in 2020, we looked at the gas prices again, and they were very similar. So we were confident that we used the appropriate gas prices for the evaluation. Next slide, please. When we looked at these opportunities or additions to the district's portfolio, we saw that adding the Tide Bay Solar project would generate roughly about $92 million in savings over the 20-year period. And over time, even with the change in gas prices, even though the gas prices have gone down, they're still driving significant amount of savings over the 20-year period. The green line on this graphic is what you should be focusing on, where the savings were developed. The other two lines, the gray line and the blue line, are just basically sensitivities around the analysis that was done. And it still generated savings for us. The difference between the Tide Bay project and the other two is that we also added additional solar or contemplated additional solar, which then drove additional savings. The bottom line here is, as natural gas prices increase, solar projects become much more financially beneficial to the district. Next slide, please. I apologize for there we go, thank you. The district has a long-term tenured relationship with Duke Energy. We have been business partners with Duke for a long period of time. They have supplied the district for many years. However, over time, they started to let us know that they won't have energy to sell us, excess energy. And so we had to figure out other ways that we could supply the rest of our portfolio. And we looked at other suppliers within the Central Florida region, quite frankly, in the state. The biggest suppliers in the state, we asked them for proposals, if you will, to supply our needs. And we got some responses, but certainly not from everybody that we had solicited from. Bottom line is, when we looked at the portfolio using a particular supplier other than Duke, it still generated savings to the tune of about $173 million savings over the 20 years. And as gas prices, as I said earlier, as gas prices increase, that line gets more and more savings for the district. So in our estimation, the Tide Bay project proved itself to be a couple things. One, beneficial from a long-term perspective in terms of keeping our costs low. The second thing is a reliable supply because it's part of the Florida grid. The third thing that I want to emphasize is that it's a great effort on the part of the district to reduce its carbon footprint. And we know that that is an important thing for not just the district, but the other energy providers in the state of Florida. So all in all, this project, this Tide Bay project, kind of checked all the boxes for us. Financially feasible, reliable, reduction in carbon footprint. It was a win-win no matter which way we looked at it. Next slide, please. So we had a preliminary discussion with the chair, and he asked us, he says, this can't be as good as it sounds. Put some pros and cons on here and let me see really what we're talking about. Well, let's focus on the pros for just a minute. It was the least cost alternative for the district. Make no mistake about it. It was $92 million initially. When we reevaluated it with other suppliers in the mix, it was $173 million of savings over the 20-year period. So there was no doubt that it was a financially smart thing to do. The second thing is, in these types of arrangement, the district has no capital outlay. There's no bonds involved. There's nothing. The developers are the ones that spend the capital to build the facility. The district has a purchase power agreement that buys the supplies from the project and has no capital exposure whatsoever. And that's something that you can't do when you're building a gas plant or a coal plant or a nuclear plant. You will have to expend capital. So the developer takes that risk. It's a fixed price over 20 years. That's also unheard of in the market. There's no other generation source that will give you a fixed price over a 20-year period. That doesn't exist. And then it's a great hedge against natural gas. As you're all aware, the natural gas market has been very volatile. Prices go up and down, and sometimes it goes up for a significant amount of time. The higher the gas prices on the NYMEX is, the more savings you're going to derive. And we showed you in slide 2 or 3 what the natural gas forecasts were, and they're still fairly consistent. Today, the gas price is still $4 for the forward curve. So we're still within the realm of reasonableness for this project. It's connected to the Duke Energy transmission system. If you kind of learn a little bit about the district's service territory, we're surrounded by Duke Energy. Duke Energy transmission system surrounds us, and we're connected to them. That's another way of reducing our costs. If we went outside of the boundaries of where we are, we would have more than one transmission requirements to take care of, which would increase our cost of energy supply to the district. And then last but not least, it lowers the carbon footprint. I was encouraged when I heard the chair said that was one of the things he's wanting to do. This does exactly that. On the con side, however, and I did find some cons, solar plants are subject to weather abnormalities. If something comes and wipes out the facility in Polk County, it is what it is. But suffice it to say that even if you build a gas plant and a hurricane came through, it would have wiped that out as well. So that is a con, I get it, but we can avoid that risk. The second thing is there's no off-peak energy production, meaning solar is going to operate when the sun is shining for the most part. So what do you do at night? Well, what we do, because it's the most economic thing to do, the district buys power off-peak. So it uses solar during the on-peak period, and probably about 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, we buy market power because it's a cheaper thing to do. If we use, the only way we could do that with a solar facility is to add battery. And battery technology is completely out of the picture right now in terms of cost. So it's cheaper to buy market power. So if you view the market power availability as a con, that's still the cheapest thing for us to do. The other con to this is, should it happen, and we have surveyed the market since our conversation and even before that, then nobody's forecasting the long-run marginal price of natural gas to be $2 for 20 years. It hasn't happened before, and we don't expect it to happen now. So if gas prices don't stay at $2, then this project will always be in the money, no matter what. Then lastly, I got to read my own writing here. Solar degradation. Over time, the panels degrade as part of the normal process of using them. If that degradation goes faster than what is anticipated by the developers, then it will have a shorter life. Yes, but they also have the ability to replace those panels, and we can just continue generating, and the district will get the benefits of that supply at a lower price, fixed price, for 20 years. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I wanted to show you that before we started adding solar to the portfolio, roughly 91% of the district's portfolio was based on natural gas, because that's the predominant fuel in the market. And so as we started to look up about having more solar and more renewables in our portfolio and reducing our carbon footprint, we ventured off into looking at solar projects. That was the real genesis of why Tide Bay occurred. And so if you look on the left-hand side, it tells you that we were predominantly natural gas and market power in the state of Florida is typically natural gas. And then we move towards the graphic on the right side that says we're going to have about, with the solar project, we're going to have about 23% of our portfolio in solar energy, 58% in natural gas, and 23% in market power. What that says to us is that we're improving our carbon footprint, we're reducing our dependence on natural gas because that's a carbon-based fuel, and we're also lowering our cost. The chair chided me when I spoke to him. He says, you tell me this is a no-brainer. It's our opinion, it's still a no-brainer. This checks all the boxes for the district. Next slide, please. So when we prepared this deck to go to the board, we had some recommendations that we thought were prudent and kind of the direction that we think the district ought to go in. What we said was we should continue to work with Regis Energy, the developer of this Tide Bay project, and get this project in place and online so the district can start saving a significant amount of money in its profile. We also had to manage their transmission service requests because as the developer, they had to request service from Duke in order to connect to Duke's system to be able to deliver energy to us. That's just part of the process. And then we had to also review their generation interconnection service agreement, which is also an agreement with Duke. So we had to kind of follow them, if you will, in their process, in them getting permission from Duke to use their transmission system to connect their solar facility so they can send the energy to us. So it wasn't just a one-off where you sign an agreement and you're done. It's a process that we helped them manage, follow the rules of the road, if you will, to make sure that come the time for in-service, that the energy would be delivered to the district because, again, the price, the reliability was so good, we didn't want to waste any time. We wanted to get going. And then we also asked them to pursue formal proposals for incremental capacity for the district because this solar project in and of itself did not supply all of the district's needs. We still had to go and get other things. The problem with that is our previous suppliers, including Duke and others, didn't have anything to offer us. And they told us that. We had worked with them for several periods of time, and they kept us appraised of what was going on, and they just couldn't go on beyond a certain point. And so we had to find other ways of looking at it, and we're still doing that even today. And then lastly, we wanted to continue discussions with another solar developer that we had been talking to out of South Florida, NextEra Energy, another nationally recognized solar development firm, to see if they had a solar facility that we could probably get into. Because again, the economics simply said, as natural gas prices went up, it was cheaper to get a fixed price solar deal for 20 years, and you could create a significant amount of savings over a 20-year period.
Does that conclude your report?
Yes, sir, it does.
Are there any questions or comments from my fellow directors? Just so the board knows, I've been through this presentation and had several questions, and my questions were answered by additional items that were put on the slide. I want to thank you for an excellent report and for your recommendation. What we need from the board is a motion to ratify the April 6, 2023 forbearance letter and authorize our district administrator to execute the Fourth Amendment to the power purchase agreement that's in your material. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you again, sir, for an excellent report.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 8.3, removal from office and terminate all planning and zoning board members and appoint the Board of Supervisors to serve as the local planning agency of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And I'll ask our General Counsel to address this item, please.
Yes, under the state growth management law, the governing body of the district has the authority to self-appoint this body as the local planning agency. Currently, there's a board called Planning and Zoning Board that serves that function. That prior board is made up of, I assume, volunteers, but of course were not appointed by you. I think it would make a lot of sense for this board in order to know what is going on with the functions of that board to take over that duty. And to, so this action item would remove and terminate the existing planning and zoning board members and appoint yourselves to serve in the capacity of the local planning agency. There's another item coming up on the agenda that would also put into the land development regulations that same thing, but you independently have this authority under the Act to remove the members of the existing advisory board and to self-appoint 5 members of the board. I'd also point out that some of our members have backgrounds in this area of the law, and I know board member Onks especially, I'm sure others have some experience in these areas as well, and I'm pretty certain that you all could handle this role very easily. So that's my recommendation. I have included a motion for your consideration in the agenda packet. If you have any questions, let me know.
So the motion or a package of motion to remove from office and terminate all planning and zoning board members and appoint the Board of Supervisors to serve as the local planning agency of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District and to perform the functions of the Planning and Zoning Board. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is 8.4, discussion and potential action regarding the selection of an urban planning firm and conducting a regional fiscal impact analysis or study to assist the district in the review and evaluation required by the District's Enabling Act. Some of the items in my prepared comments related to housing, traffic, and environmental issues that this district is going to want to take up can't be done without the assistance of an urban planner and probably an economist to do the regional impact study. And so what I'm asking for, and I'm gonna need Supervisor Onk's assistance with this because he is one of the preeminent land use lawyers in Florida. But what I'd like at this stage is authorization from the board to move forward to evaluate regional urban planners and economists, and I'll figure out a way to use the capability of Supervisor Ongst in that review process. And then what I envision is that he and I, working of course under the sunshine laws, will bring some recommendations to the board. And this is, by the way, this is something that I think we need to fast track because as I indicated in my prepared remarks, we want to get our evaluation to this legislature and this governor before the next legislative session. So I'd ask for that authority. Does it require a motion, Mr. Langley?
Yes, sir.
I move to direct or authorize the chair to gather information and bring back to us regarding an urban planning firm.
I'll second. I'd like to add some discussion points, Mr. Chair.
Awesome, sure.
The discussion points are, I'm not sure if this is something that Mr. Alex wants to take on himself, but I would be comfortable if you are, either delegating it to him to bring back to us, or I'm not sure if you're envisioning a committee of two. Either way, I think we can decide on how you'd like to proceed with that. If you would want to expand upon your original remarks and how you want to use Mr. Ongst and ourselves within the confines of Sunshine. I would ask that 2 points be considered. I'm sure you're thinking of it already. You mentioned them earlier, but the affordable housing needs of the district, that's been a significant challenge throughout Central Florida and probably the state. I'd be curious what kind of results come out of a study. Make sure we get an elaboration on that point, as well as some of the utility remarks that were shared earlier. What makes the most sense in terms of utilities? Again, you all are probably already thinking of this, but from my perspective, I think those will be important for us to consider.
Those are well-taken comments, and I agree we're going to deal with those issues. Let me ask Mr. Langley, Supervisor Ongst and I can't work together as a committee, can we?
Well, the only way we could do that is if we have public meetings where you two are having these discussions. So it's really better if the board delegates to just one board member of this process to bring back a contract for the board approval.
Well, let me ask Supervisor Ongst, is this something that you're willing to take on your own?
Yes, Mr. Chair, with the board's approval and support, of course, it would be something I'd be willing to do.
Awesome.
So let me amend my motion to authorize Board Member Ongst to go through a fact-finding mission and provide us with a recommendation for a urban planning firm and as well as conducting a fiscal impact analysis.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any other discussion? Any objections? Note that the motion passes unanimously. Next item is 8.5, board discussion and potential action regarding direction to the district staff and legal counsel and priorities of the board for future agendas. One of the action items that I know our general counsel will direct us on is with respect to the powerful presentations that we received from trial counsel today in terms of what action he recommends that the board take. So I'll turn it over to our general counsel.
Thank you. I would recommend at this time that the board move to direct the district's litigation counsel to prepare a resolution for consideration at the April 26th board meeting, which is next week, which does the following. Declares the development agreement and covenant restrictions entered into by Reedy Creek Improvement District and Walt Disney Parks and Resorts USA void ab initio, makes findings of fact in support thereof, and directs actions as needed to assert the district's positions on those issues.
Is there a motion to support that?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Please note the motion passes unanimously. Are there any other action items under 8.5? Mr. Langley?
None for me.
Can
Okay.
I interject, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is the best place. It might be in 8.6, but it's a bit of a hybrid. There's some good informational items. I wanted to provide some comments to the board to consider for the next meeting. Some of those crossed over, both legal and district administrator. You have a copy. If anyone would like an electronic copy, I think Mr. Classy and Mr. Langley also have electronic copies. I just wanted to bring that up. It's mundane, but if you'd like those remarks from me, I want to make sure you knew that I had provided some comments.
So you want to provide comments?
Comments on some, I think it was item 6.2 and 6.4, job descriptions.
So you want to have a discussion on that now?
I don't need any further discussion right now. I think we're going to bring it up in the next meeting. I just wanted to note that I had provided some feedback in form of written comments.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Langley, anything else on 8.5?
I believe earlier in the meeting, Mr. Classy was directed to bring back something for next week based on a prior discussion we had during his report. And I don't think we need further direction on that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, and then 8.6, Vice Chair, is that something that you've already provided, or is there more that you want to provide on the negotiations that you're having with Mr. Classy?
I don't think there's anything further than what was already shared, but I'm certainly happy to discuss it if someone has a question or a comment. Otherwise, I'm okay moving on until next week or the next meeting.
Any comments or questions by my fellow board members on 8.6? 8.7 is an item that the Vice Chair put on the agenda, so I'll turn it over to him.
So I believe this was predominantly covered in another resolution, and I think we're going to hear about it next week, so it might be something that I'd want included on that agenda, Mr. Langley, which we've already discussed. And it also bleeds in subject matter-wise into 9.1 with the COVID resolutions and what the policy is of this district. And I understand we'll hear about that in 9.1, whereas this district is not going to enforce any COVID restrictions, vaccine mandates, et cetera, within the district staff. And I think at our next meeting, we'll hear about that with respect to other entities outside of just the district itself or the district staff and our employees. I think it's well known that the emergency officially ended according to Washington, D.C. on April 10th. And I think we're just kind of catching up to an extent and piggybacking off of that. I know the Florida House, I think it's House Bill 1013, is also addressing this currently in the legislature. So again, an important housekeeping item, I think, for the district, but did want to bring that up and have it recognized in case there are other comments. I'm happy to address those if there are some.
So is this an item you're going to put on the agenda for the next meeting, Vice Chair?
I believe Mr. Langley can more accurately describe that point.
Yes, sir. So we already have advertised for the next meeting resolution number 640, which addresses COVID-19 restrictions and mandates by businesses within the district. That resolution also puts in place in resolution form other things that affect district operations and contractors of the district and district meetings. I'd also point out, and we could talk about this in 9.1, but the resolution adopting the board's rules and regulations also provides a rule that discusses that we do not require for your attendance at our public meetings any COVID restrictions, mask mandates, or vaccines. And also, as a policy, we do not require these matters from our district employees. We will not deny services from any taxpayer that wants services from the district on a basis of any sort of COVID mandate. So we are taking action in part today on those issues, but we're being a little, we're going to capture some additional items next week in Resolution 640.
Mr. Chair, I think this is somewhat germane, but Mr. Langley, in reviewing the docket of litigation, I can't remember if it was the Middle District or the Ninth Circuit, but I noticed that the district has been named recently in some retaliation or discrimination lawsuits as it relates to COVID-19 practices. And I just wanted to see if we can get an update on those at a future shade meeting. Not to put you on the spot about that right now, but it's something that I've noticed. I don't know if they've been served, but they were filed recently.
All right, we'll have to bring that back for a future meeting so I can get updated on that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Vice Chair, on that point?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so have I missed anything on new business? Is there any further new business that anybody on the board wants to discuss or address? If not, we'll move to the public hearings part of the agenda. And first, the 9.1, which is resolution number 638, and I'll turn that over to our general counsel.
Right, I'm going to read the title first. Resolution number 638, a resolution of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District creating rules and procedures for the Board of Supervisors and governing procedures, conduct, decorum for meetings of the board, providing for severability, conflicts, and an effective date. As the board directed, I prepared for your review and consideration board rules and procedures for the operation of your meetings and the general conduct of the members of the board. This document also governs the decorum and conduct of the attendees of the meetings of the board. And as I mentioned previously, there's also a COVID policy within this resolution as well. This is the sort of a working procedures for how matters get on an agenda and how we conduct our meetings, the time limitations set for public speakers, the enforcement mechanisms for the chair to implement and enforce these rules. There's a number of items in here. It's it doesn't address all the organizational issues of the entire district, but it is a good start, and I know this is something that the prior board did not really, it appears from what I understand that they did not have formalized rules for how they govern their meetings, which is very unusual. So as this board directed, they wanted to correct that, and that's why we expedited these set of rules for your consideration today. That's all I have. This would be a motion to approve resolution number 638 as presented, or if any board member has any potential or suggested revisions, we can, if the board agrees, incorporate those today with the adoption of the resolution.
I move to approve resolution 638, and just want to add that it was well done, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have one point of discussion on this. Would it be appropriate to include something about public identification of lobbyists who wish to contact the board in the procedures, or would that be better addressed in another fashion, Mr. Langley?
I think we need to, it'll be tough to come up with that today. It is something I think we do need to address. I think because of the importance of the working order sort of procedures, I wanted to get this in front of you. I think the lobbyist part needs to be addressed separately, and I'm willing to tackle that for bringing it back to the future meeting.
Okay, for discussion purposes only, I think it'd be helpful if we had that maybe at the next meeting, if you can muster it. If not, I have no further discussion on this, other than I thought it was very well done. Thank you for your efforts on it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, the only thing I want to make sure that everybody understands is in terms of board policies, as you've heard a number of times, the old board had virtually no board policies, which is highly irregular. And this really is just the tip of the iceberg. The vice chair has just identified an issue that we're going to need to address, and there's many more. And so we're going to have a much more comprehensive board policy. I'll just share with you one of the ideas that I've been discussing with our financial advisor is that we don't have an internal audit function in this district. And with some of the accounting irregularities and what we've heard from some of our employees, that their complaints, grievances, and suggestions fell on deaf ears with the last board. And I've read what is purported to be a whistleblower policy for the district, and I find it to be highly inadequate. There really is no anonymity for the employee. And so that is one of the other items, is we're going to have a very accessible whistleblower policy. We're going to look at having an internal auditor function that reports dotted line to the administrator and direct line to the general counsel. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to continue to work on board policies like lobbying issues, whistleblower policies, and many more. So what I anticipate is at every meeting or every other meeting, we're going to be proposing new policies until we bring this district into the appropriate good practices for a governing agency. Any other comments on that?
Chair, on this item, I would ask for a voice vote because it is a regulation. I'd like to make it clear that for the record that all voted in favor.
Okay. Is there anyone opposed to it? Does that work?
Well, it will work, but I was
Okay.
asking if you could go ahead and do the aye. And,
Okay.
or no.
All in favor? of the
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, 9.2, resolution number 639. Mr. Langley?
Resolution number 639, a resolution of Central Florida Tourism Oversight District amending Article 6, Chapter 6-90, and Article 7, Chapter 7-20, and Chapter 7-30 of the RCID Land Development Regulations, providing for codification, severability, and an effective date. Now, the Enabling Act of this district is very clear on this matter. As constituted by the law, effective on February 27, 2023, this district has superior authority over the entire district, including within the cities within the district, on the issues of comprehensive planning, zoning, land development regulations, environmental protection regulations, platting, subdivision regulations, fire and safety, building. This act that created this district also gave specifically the authority for this district to review, process, comment on, approve with conditions, or reject applications for development orders and building permits pertaining to properties within the entire district. Not only does it give that authority, it actually compels by legislation that you must exercise these powers. You have no discretion. You must do it within the city limits and throughout the entire district. The purpose of this resolution is to make the land development regulations that predate this legislation consistent with this legislation. So it's clear on the books that this district has these authorities and that the cities within the district do not have the ability to get in our lane and interfere with your duty as a district to enforce these superior authorities and these regulations. One of the important ways of enforcing a comprehensive plan and land development regulations is where you get a development application that has to be reviewed. That's the process in part where you enforce these regulations. get a site plan, you get an application, you determine whether or not that project meets these regulations. So if you have another jurisdiction reviewing applications, that is a problem. And it's very clear in the law that creates this district, this is our job, this is our role, and we must do it. So again, what this does is it makes the existing regulations consistent with our act. It also further clarifies that this board is now serving the function of the local planning agency, and you are also serving as the Planning and Zoning Board with respect to any reference of that board in the Land Development Code. It also makes the notice provisions for amendments to the Land Development Code consistent with the Act. The Act provides that this board acts in adoption of regulations through resolution. So we're making that clear, and that resolution could be done through a single public hearing and a single vote. I am recommending that we have a second reading of this for the next week. That's already been advertised and it's teed up for the next meeting. But under the Act, that's not necessary. We're just giving public additional opportunity to comment if they so desire. So also, the Act provides that if to the extent the cities wish to adopt regulations on land development matters, their regulations cannot be in conflict with the district's regulations, and they must, if they do pass them, must be more stringent against development than our own regulations. So that, again, is just making our regulations consistent with state law. So I don't have any further comments on this. I did have a proposed motion in the requested item. It would be to approve this resolution and to set the next reading and public hearing on April 26th.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve resolution number 639 and set second reading for April 26th.
Second?
Second.
And before we vote, can we make sure that no one wants to speak on this matter, although I don't think anyone requested to, but just for the record.
Public comments.
Yeah, I thought public comments would have covered that, but in the...
Yeah, well, we have a public hearing. I just want to make sure no one who was here earlier wants to speak now on this particular issue, because this is a public hearing.
Anybody want to speak on the subject? Hearing none, is there any discussion from the board on the motion? Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Can I get a voice vote again? I'm sorry.
Oh, you want?
I
Okay.
just like.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
And then there are no items on unfinished business, and so that takes us to the part of the agenda for other business. At this point in the meeting, we're going to go into what's called a shade meeting, or a attorney-client conference with our lawyers concerning the union negotiations with the firefighters. But I do know that my fellow directors, some have had made some comments on this subject. Before we go into shade meeting, do any of my directors want to make any comment on this subject?
Mr. Chair, I will. One of the biggest priorities that I've had as a board member here in the district is to ensure that the men and women of our fire department, our first responders, our paramedics, our EMTs, have the resources they need to do their jobs. And I will say it's not anti-business to expect one of the most powerful corporations in the world to pay the same impact fees for its development that every other business in the state of Florida has to pay. And it's not anti-Florida for us to ensure that the men and women of our fire department, our first responders, are appropriately paid, and they have the equipment and the certifications they need to do their jobs and to keep our guests and our stakeholders safe. And I am extremely pleased, Mr. Chair, that under your leadership and the board's leadership and Mr. Classy working together, that we've bridged a gap of 5 years in about 2 weeks. And I'm very confident that we're going to close that gap and get this job done. But I just want you to know, men and women of our fire department, our first responders, that we have your back. You do matter, and we're going to represent you going forward. And I'm so thankful to hear that our first responder who had his medical issue is out of the hospital and is doing well. And I hope his family knows that they're in our prayers and that we're going to support them no matter what. And I especially want to make sure we take a look at those benefits and those investigations and make sure those are done fairly and that we set a new tone in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you for those comments. Any other comments on this point?
I just wanted to make one comment because I see members of staff here, and I just wanted to thank you guys because I know that you've been put in somewhat of an uncomfortable position, but that's no reflection, as Chair Garcia had mentioned before. You guys have served this district incredibly well. It was wonderful meeting with you and has been, and so I just wanted to recognize you all.
Anything else? So just so everyone understands, we as a board are going to recess now temporarily and go into another room with our lawyers to discuss the union negotiation for the firefighters, and then we will reconvene or come back in here after recess, and then we'll adjourn after that. And you're welcome to stay until we come back and adjourn, and make yourself at home, but we'll be back in a little bit.
Okay.
Well, that's, actually, that's the Disney court reporter.
Okay, we have concluded the shade meeting. If there's no other business before the board, we will stand adjourned. We're adjourned.
Thank you.